Chapter 2298. Now you've seen the Heavenly Armament Pavilion led by Xie Danqiong. I can guarantee that the strength of the other brothers' Heavenly Armament Pavilion may not be inferior to Xie Danqiong. Perhaps they may even be superior. Crazed Book and Painting King were even more shocked when they heard this. If it was only Xie Danqiong, everyone would be shocked. Everyone had their own opportunities. It was not necessarily a coincidence that led to a rapid rise. However, if everyone was like this, then it definitely couldn't be a coincidence. What kind of terrifying strength did they have? When all the Heavenly Armament Pavilions under their command were combined into one, this force would not be inferior to any of the heavenly palaces in the Heaven Imperial Court. Unknowingly, this group of little fellows had already achieved such an earth-shattering achievement. This was simply a miracle that had never happened in the history of the Heaven Imperial Court. If Chu Yang did not mention it, who would have thought that such a huge force that was enough to conquer the world and overturn the Heaven Imperial Court had been brewing for a long time? Who would have known that such a force had fully developed and was about to appear in front of everyone without anyone noticing? Each of Chu Yang's brothers was a peerless genius. However, what King of Painting and King of Painting did not know was that Chu Yang had a secret hand, Mo Tianji. Mo Tianji was not only the head of the Heavenly Armament Pavilion's intelligence organization, but also one of the top strategists in the world. With him secretly helping Chu Yang, the strength of Chu Yang's forces would be multiplied by several times. Any one of Chu Yang's brothers could decide the outcome of a battle from 1,000 miles away. They were all outstanding talents of the world. Any movement in the Heaven Imperial Court could not be hidden from the intelligence organization set up by Mo Tianji. They could communicate with each other at any time. They could contact each other at any time. They could change at any time. Of course, they could attack at any time. Such a strong combination was simply a perfect dream combination. Crazed Book was shocked by the strength of Chu Yang's brothers. He was almost stunned. In the long history of the Heaven Imperial Court, as far as Crazed Book knew, there was only one who could be compared with this dream combination of Chu Yang's. The force of two peerless masters joining hands. The combination of these two meant that they were absolutely invincible within the Heaven Imperial Court. Even a saint would have to retreat in the face of this force. That was the combination of Donghuang Shui Leihan and Heavenly Emperor of Purple Clouds Zi Hao. However, as these two brothers each ascended to the position of emperor, they went their separate ways. The Shui combination never appeared again. Later, the Heavenly Emperor of Purple Clouds Zi Hao. He faced with a strong enemy. He finally died in Purple Heavens. Such a dream combination was lost. However, from the looks of it now, this dreamy combination formed by Chu Yang and his brothers was in no way inferior to the combination of Shui Leihan and Zi Hao back then. It was even more. Below Shui Leihan and Zi Hao were the 7 star guardians who were responsible for protecting the fate energy of their respective heavens and earth after the Heavenly Palace divided the heavens and earth. Heavenly Armament Pavilions was duo was dream combination was dream combination was dream combination. However, Bookworm and the other insiders knew very well that although they were familiar with each other's background and could work together seamlessly, they were definitely not a team. Because most of them were busy with their own things, there were very few opportunities for them to fight together. Because when they were together, they already had their own achievements and their own pride. In addition, their own strength was still at the peak of the Heaven Imperial Court. There were very few things that needed any one of them to solve, not to mention many of them joining hands. The so-called combination was like using a butcher's knife to kill a chicken. It was useless. Chu Yang and the others, on the other hand, had fought their way up from humble beginnings. There was no distinction between them. Their silent, tacit understanding was even more indescribable. It could be said that they had reached the point where they didn't care about anything, not to mention achievements and pride. In the face of such feelings, those things were not worth mentioning at all. They were disdainful. Heavenly Emperors and Book Maniacs' hearts were shocked at the same time. It seems that if Chu Yang and the other brothers are fully fledged, what level of strength would they be able to display? But there was one thing that was undoubtedly certain. The method that the saint used to deal with Zihao and Shui Leihan was definitely useless. There were only two of them, Shui Leihan and Zihao. So, by dividing two worlds for them, it had intentionally or unintentionally separated the two of them. But Chu Yang's brothers, including himself, numbered no less than 10. If the same method was used, Book Maniac and Book Maniac swallowed a mouthful of saliva. They thought of a few people at the same time. Ho! 10 worlds. Unless the saint could hand over the entire Heaven Imperial Court to them? But if that was the case, the saint himself would only be a figurehead. Then what was there to deal with? They were simply digging their own graves. Emoyuntian. Looking at the news of victory that came from various places, Xie Danqiong didn't look happy. Instead, he frowned deeply. At the side, Mu Tsunglan was also frowning. He was obviously very worried. Below him, the officer excitedly reported, "The army has arrived at 100 Grass City." The city lord was originally one of our people, and the garrison general was also one of Commander Mu's former subordinates. Therefore, the city surrendered. Our army didn't lose a single soldier, and the army smoothly occupied 100 Grass City. Jade Mountain Pass, upon hearing the news, has surrendered. Military Flag Ridge is now under my control. The 30,000 soldiers and generals there have all surrendered. They are willing to follow the great commander and participate in the demon-slaying mission. Currently, half of Dark Cloud Sky's vast rivers and mountains are already under the control of our army. There are still many people watching and waiting. They are just waiting for us to lead the army north. Then, the world will respond to us, and a single spark will start a prairie fire. The military officer continued to report the various victories, and his voice was so excited that it was almost trembling. However, Mu Tsunglan and Xie Danqiong's frown deepened. Ever since they joined forces, sending troops to the north, every battle was a sure win. Unexpectedly, there had never been any defeats. Not to mention being defeated, he hadn't even encountered any decent resistance. Up until now, it could be said that everything had been going smoothly for him. But, it's going too smoothly. This isn't right. Xie Danqiong frowned. No matter what, it shouldn't be so smooth. This isn't right. Although the fact that Yuan Tianji is a heavenly demon has already been confirmed, and the general trend is undoubtedly on our side, but Yuan Tianji has been in charge of Dark Cloud Sky for millions of years. He is far-sighted and has set up a grand scheme. I believe that he has already set up countless hidden chess pieces. It's impossible that everyone in the world can completely believe and accept it. That's right. Even though we have a righteous name, we don't have an official status now. In the eyes of the world, I'm afraid that there should be even more people scolding us as traitors who want to steal the throne. How can it be so smooth? This really doesn't make sense. The current battle situation is too strange. Mu Tsunglan was also full of worry. How could he, who had been on the battlefield for a long time, not detect the strangeness? Taking 10,000 steps back, even if Yuan Tianji has lost the hearts of the people, he has still been the emperor of Tian-Ke for more than 1,000,000 years. How can he not have the slightest bit of resistance? All of this is too strange. It's too peaceful, too smooth. This was the thought that both of them shared. However, what exactly was the reason, and what exactly was wrong, the two of them still couldn't figure it out. Although both of them were rather scheming and quick-witted people who could adapt to the situation when faced with an enemy, and Mu Tsunglan was even more so, they still couldn't figure out what strange change had happened. The two of them might be talented generals who could take charge of an area, but they were ultimately not politicians. He was not very proficient in scheming, and scheming. What worries me the most right now is the counterattack of the heavenly demon forces. It's really too weak. No, perhaps it should be said that until now, there hasn't been the slightest bit of counterattack from them. Mu Tsunglan frowned and made the final decision. There must be something very strange about this. Although we have sensed it, we can't figure out what it is. If we can't figure out this mystery, I'm afraid that this time, we'll really suffer a huge setback that we can't turn around. Mu Tsunglan's voice was full of worry. But the situation is good now. If we don't pursue the victory, I'm afraid that the hearts of the people below will turn cold. Xie Danqiong smiled bitterly. Mu Tsunglan also smiled bitterly in return. They clearly knew that there might be a fatal trap ahead, but they had no choice but to enter and ignore it. Life was really full of strange things. It's impossible for us to not move in the current situation, but we don't necessarily need to invest too much, Xie Danqiong said slowly. The most important thing now is to stabilize and develop the rear, and not blindly attack and seize territory. Advance slowly, don't advance rashly. This way, we can preserve our strength and also continue to develop our strength. When the other party's intentions are fully exposed, we can instantly react and plan a countermeasure. This way, even if we lose at the front, we still have the capital to make a comeback. We won't be completely defeated and have no chance to turn things around. Mu Tsunglan agreed with Xie Danqiong's words. The current situation was really too strange. It made Mu Tsunglan, who had faced many enemies and planned far ahead, lose confidence. Now that the world was in an uproar, Yuan Tianji didn't even say a word of explanation. How could the heavenly demon be so easy to deal with? Xie Danqiong returned to his study with a heavy heart. He rubbed his brows, trying hard to guess what Yuan Tianji wanted to do. But after thinking about it for half a day, he still didn't have a clue. Chapter 2299. At this time, Xie Danqiong could not help but miss Mo Tianji and boss Chu Yang. Whether it was Mo Tianji or Chu Yang, he believed that as long as one of them was here, they would be able to guess the other party's plan. They would not be as passive as he was now, without any clue. The situation was clear now. He knew that the other party must have a big plan, but he could not see any clues at all. Mo Tianji's subordinates in the Tianji intelligence department were also depressed about this. This was because there wasn't a single piece of valuable information about Yuan Tianji. Could it be that the other party's intelligence system was really sealed so tightly? In front of him, there was a continuous battle going on like a raging fire. But behind, there was a city of worries, unable to do anything. Mu Tsunglan sent out a large number of spies, and even mobilized all the spies that were still in the government of Mo Yuntian, but they still could not find out any useful information. But gradually, a wave of opposition suddenly rose. At the beginning, there was only a little of this, and it was almost unnoticed. But gradually it evolved into a prairie fire. His Majesty the Sky Emperor is a heavenly demon? How stupid is this statement? How laughable! Is this Mu Tsunglan out of his mind? It's fine if you want to rebel. After all, people strive for greater heights and water flows to lower places. You want to take a step further and rule over a part of the world. Everyone can understand this idea. After all, you are already an extremely powerful official. If you want to go further, you can only rebel. Even if you say that His Majesty Heaven Emperor is mudda-headed and tyrannical, or that he is addicted to beauties and licentious, these are not surprising. However, you actually slandered His Majesty Heaven Emperor as the incarnation of the extraterritorial demon. His Majesty the Sky Emperor has been in charge of Mo Yuntian for millions of years. In these millions of years, could it be that only you, Mu Tsunglan, have the discerning eyes to see that His Majesty the Sky Emperor is a heavenly demon? Are the others blind or deaf? Do they not know how to distinguish between humans and demons? Since His Majesty the Sky Emperor is a heavenly demon, then what are you, Mu Tsunglan? Mu Tsunglan, scheming, a pure traitor. Think about it. In the past million years, Mo Yuntian has undergone several changes. His Majesty the Sky Emperor is like a stabilizing needle, intimidating the entire Sky Emperor. If it's really the Sky Demon, who wants to overthrow Mo Yuntian, there are tens of millions of opportunities. Why hasn't he made a move yet? In conclusion, His Majesty the Celestial Emperor is definitely not an extraterrestrial demon. It is impossible for him to be the incarnation of an extraterrestrial demon. So Mu Xinglan is simply spreading lies to mislead people. This is unforgivable. This wave gradually rose, gradually took shape, and its momentum gradually became great. Slowly it swept through the whole Moyun sky, and the spearhead was directed at Mu Tianlan. Moreover, there was no way to stop it. No matter how he tried to defend himself, it would only make things worse. We commoners just want to live a peaceful life. We were clearly living well before. Why do we have to start a civil war just because you said that His Majesty the Celestial Emperor is an extraterrestrial demon? Some people were dissatisfied, but they voiced the thoughts of the commoners. Once the flames of war start, the commoners will have no way to live. Don't you understand these principles, Mu Xinglan? Someone said bitterly. Not to mention that His Majesty the Sky Emperor is not an extraterrestrial demon. Even if he is, he wouldn't harm the commoners of Mo Yuntian. On the contrary, my ancestors have been under the rule of His Majesty the Sky Emperor for generations. They eat their fill and wear warm clothes. What's wrong? If this is the day of being ruled by the extraterrestrial demons, I'm perfectly willing to accept it. Someone was being unreasonable, spouting specious and fallacious arguments. Right now, Mo Yuntian is filled with the flames of war. Is this your original intention for slaying the demons? Someone asked seriously. There were even some Confucian scholars who wrote rapidly, waving and writing, cursing Mu Xinglan with thousands of words. Mu Xinglan is an ambitious person through and through. For his own ambitions, for his own hegemony, he will do anything. Someone asserted. He's a traitor, yet he wants to give himself a sanctimonious and dignified reason to rebel. Shameless to the extreme. Someone said disdainfully. What you said is simply nonsense. If there is no reason to rebel, what right does Mu Xinglan have to rebel? Someone analyzed with a wise face. Reasonable, reasonable. Most people agreed. Mu Xinglan, you said that His Majesty the Sky Emperor is an extraterrestrial demon. Why don't you take out conclusive evidence? Could it be that you can convict someone just by opening and closing your mouth? Who do you think you are? Someone was extremely indignant. There were also countless public declarations that appeared out of nowhere. Book of 10,000 Words. My discussion of Mu Xinglan's 10 major crimes. Punitive expedition against Mu Xinglan. Return Mo Yuntian. 10 reasons why Mu Xinglan is bound to lose. All these things came crashing down in an overwhelming manner. In just a few days, everyone had a feeling that when they woke up, the entire world was against Mu Xinglan. Everyone was pointing at him, everyone was cursing him. In this world, what kind of group was the strongest? That was the masses. The masses who did not know the truth. This group of people was undoubtedly the strongest. After all, in any world, the truth was only known by a few people who had the qualifications. And in 100,000 people, there might not even be one person who understood. Although Yuan Tianjie himself did not make any excuses, he used a very effective and simple method to fiercely counterattack Mu Xinglan and Xie Danqiu. I won't defend myself. Why should I defend myself? The innocent knows that they are innocent. Why should I defend myself? If I, as the Sky Emperor, have to come out to refute such a ridiculous and nonsensical matter, then I really can't afford to lose this face. Mu Xinglan, you can say whatever you want, just let him say it. Don't tell me that if he says I'm an extraterrestrial demon, then I'm really an extraterrestrial demon? Yuan Tianjie did not need to say these words at all. Naturally, he would. He would say it. Moreover, those people who said it for him were far better than what he said himself. Even more so. However, the ironic thing was that everyone who said this was a bunch of people who did not know the truth and were just following the crowd. Moreover, the more ironic thing was that most of these people were knowledgeable people who thought that their own understanding was the truth. This kind of situation simply made everyone who knew the inside story sigh from the bottom of their hearts. But in this kind of situation, there was really no evidence to insist that Yuan Tianjie was an extraterrestrial demon. At least, there was no evidence that could obtain everyone's approval. The Rebellion of the Seven Princes. How could ordinary people know what kind of people the 7 princes were? There was even less of an explanation. Once this kind of public opinion arose, it could not be controlled at all. Even the source could not be found. The more it spread, the more intense it became. Even Xiadanqiong and Mu Tsunglan's camps were quietly spreading similar news. Some people even thought, "Is it true or not? Is it right for us to follow Mu Tsunglan and rebel like this?" At that time, I only listened to Commander Mu's one-sided words, and my blood heated up, and I blindly followed him. But now that I think about it, there are actually too many things that I don't understand. There are too many strange things. That's true, the logic is really so. Silence. Is this something that can be said here? Yes, 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 yes. If they did not say it here, where could they say it? Was there a place that specialized in this kind of topic? For a moment, the morale of the army wavered. The soldiers had no fighting spirit, and the generals had no fighting spirit. Mu Tsunglan's trusted subordinates consecutively beheaded many of the lower-level officers who had spread the rumors. However, this kind of action only made the rumors more and more intense. I'm afraid this rumor is true. Otherwise, why would he kill people? He must be angry out of humiliation. It seems that Commander Mu is guilty. Otherwise, why didn't His Majesty the Sky Emperor kill those people who spoke ill of him? When Mu Tsunglan found out about the killings, he immediately issued an order to stop it. However, the public opinion had already expanded to the point where it could no longer be salvaged. On a certain night, there was an incident of desertion in an army. There were not many people. There were only a few of them. However, on the second day, the number of deserters suddenly increased greatly. Thousands of deserters appeared in the various army camps overnight. On the third day, the general of an army suddenly announced that he had left the uprising army and retreated. His whereabouts were unknown. Following that, the fourth day, the fifth day, such situations actually became more and more frequent, and became more and more intense. In the beginning, they could still use military discipline to punish the deserters and calm the chaos. However, later on, it became a situation where the law could not punish the masses. Large batches of deserters continued to appear. Faced with such a situation, Mu Tsunglan and Xiadanqiong were so worried that their hair almost turned white. They never thought that the great situation that they had created with great difficulty would be destroyed by such rumors. Now, of the 70 million people in the uprising army, only those who had followed Mu Tsunglan at the beginning remained. The total number of soldiers was less than 20 million. The rest had more or less dispersed. Of those who remained, it was not known who was still trustworthy, who was left behind to be a spy and prepared to betray at the crucial moment to atone for their crimes. Perhaps some people were still observing and had not decided whether to leave or not. Faced with such a situation, Mu Tsunglan and Xiadanqiong were completely helpless. The other party had not even made any big moves and he had already been defeated by mere rumors. Defeat without a fight. This was undoubtedly the biggest humiliation in Mu Tsunglan's life. The biggest failure. However, there was no way to deal with it. As the Heavenly Emperor, Yuan Tianji had already ruled over dark cloud sky for millions of years. It was deeply rooted and deeply ingrained in the hearts of the people. Mu Tsunglan and Xiadanqiong finally decided to temporarily stop the attack and reorganize the internal affairs first to stabilize the morale of the army. Otherwise, if this continued, even their current loyal subordinates would be shaken. However, at this time, Yuan Tianji's counterattack finally came. This counterattack was very simple and pure, but it was also very fatal. The counterattack was just a letter. A letter to Commander Mu, a letter to the world, but it was like a sharp and powerful declaration of rebellion, almost forcing Mu Tsunglan into a dead end. I'm very sad. I wanted to write a single chapter, but changed my mind and wrote it here. I'll try to be brief. I've been very busy at home these 2 days. Yesterday morning, I was shopping for a ring with my wife on Valentine's Day when I received a call saying that my aunt had passed away. They were very close. My father and my uncle have the same grandfather. I hurried home and was told to send her to the hospital for emergency treatment. At around 1:30 in the afternoon, I received a call saying that she had passed away. At that time, I was updating the first chapter, and had passed away, so I had to ask for leave. Thus, I asked for leave after the chapter. Then, before I even released it, I received news that her condition had stabilized, but she had become a vegetable. Thus, I hurriedly edited it. Thus, everyone saw a long string of ellipses at the end of the chapter. But now, and is critically ill. I'll be answering one phone call after another. Thus, the updates these 2 days are very irregular, but the specific situation. Cough, I'm also on tenterhooks right now. Actually, everyone is on tenterhooks. I don't know what to say. Anyway, I might ask for leave these 2 days. But I really don't dare to confirm which day it will be. It's hard to say now. Chapter 2300. Yuan Tianjie's declaration even abandoned the previous format, and directly started with the words "We are in pain" to express the infinite anger in his heart. Marshal Mu has always been on the same boat with us through thick and thin. It can be said that the current Mou Tian cannot leave Marshal Mu. Every inch of our territory is filled with Marshal Mu's contributions. Commander-in-Chief Mu has always been diligent, willing to work hard without complaint, and has made great contributions. We are deeply proud of him and have a personal relationship with Marshal Mu like brothers. Now Marshal Mu has been deceived by a scoundrel and actually slandered us as a demon. We do not feel angry, we only feel pain. We are very pained. We have thought about it and realized, but we do not know how we have wronged our old brother who has worked with us for 1,000,000 years. We also do not understand what made you change like this. Is it just because of a traitor's slander? But no matter what the reason is, Sun Lan, as long as you come back, we are willing to disregard the past and apologize to you. We cannot bear to part with you. Mou Tian cannot go without you. The countless people of Mou Tian have already suffered too much. They cannot bear a fierce civil war. These hardships and sufferings should not be borne by them. Sun Lan, my most important subject, come back. For our deep friendship of 1,000,000 years, for the peace and tranquility of Mou Tian. For the millions of innocent people. Sun Lan, please think about it. Is it worth it to do this? Turning back is still more precious than gold. Moreover, we are brothers who have been together for 1,000,000 years. We announce here that as long as Mu Sun Lan is willing to mend his ways, he will immediately be reinstated. All his followers will not be punished. Everything will be lenient. If we really did something wrong, we are willing to write a letter of punishment and announce it to the world. We will apologize to Marshal Mu in person. We make the above promise in front of the people of the world. If there is one thing we cannot do, we will accept the wrath of the heavens. Marshal Mu, come back. We hope you will think about it carefully. We will wait for your reply. Before you recover, we will not use a single soldier to fight. We are all flesh and blood, how can we bear to fight against each other? It is the greatest misfortune of the world. This letter from Heavenly Emperor in Cloud, Yuan Tianjie, could be said to be humble to the extreme. As a celestial emperor, for a supreme being to be able to compromise like this, his sincerity truly made people sigh with emotion. Once this letter came out, the entire Mayan sky was shocked. What followed was complete silence. Then, it was a chorus of praises that connected heaven and earth. Everywhere was filled with praises. There were even people who cried bitterly because of it. For our Mou Tian, for a traitor, His Majesty the Heavenly Emperor is actually willing to do this. What kind of humiliation is this? Woo, His Majesty the Heavenly Emperor is really too good. Towards this kind of heinous sinner, he is actually so magnanimous. He is truly a wise ruler of a generation. How fortunate am I, Mayan Sky, to have such a wise ruler as the Emperor. His Majesty the Heavenly Emperor is only willing to make such a compromise for the sake of the hundreds of millions of people of Mayan Sky. In order to avoid suffering, the people are willing to compromise like this. Woo woo, long live His Majesty the Heavenly Emperor, long live 10,000 years. Now, let's see if this deceitful Mu Tsunglan can realize his mistake and mend his ways. His Majesty the Heavenly Emperor has already done this. If Mu Tsunglan still wants to rebel and still has the dream of ascending to the throne, he is truly worse than a pig or a dog. AI sigh. His Majesty the Heavenly Emperor is so magnanimous. As long as that Mu Tsunglan still has a bit of humanity, he will definitely repent. Che, if Mu Tsunglan really has a bit of conscience, he should hurry up and commit suicide to apologize. What face does such a despicable person have to live in this world? Yuan Tianji. Mu Tsunglan took a deep breath. Looking at this declaration that was not a declaration, he felt his insides burn. He was clearly a demon, but he could make it sound so dignified. Such a compromise, such a noble character and unquestionable integrity, such a deep sense of righteousness. Yuan Tianji, how can you say such things? Do you still know the word shame? Could it be that a person who is so despicable can really be invincible in the world? Mu Tsunglan's face was red. He slammed his palm on the table, causing the red sandalwood table to shatter into pieces. Mu Tsunglan had clearly forgotten an important point. Yuan Tianji was not a person. Whether a person who was so despicable could be invincible in the world was still unknown, but the power that a demon who was so despicable could display had already appeared in the mortal world. It was truly a power that could dominate the world. Even a hero could not stop it. It was really too sharp. Mu Tsunglan's chest heaved up and down. He only felt that he was seeing stars and his heart was beating wildly. It was as if he could faint at any time. Even with the calmness that Mu Tsunglan had accumulated over 1,000,000 years, he was not feeling so uncomfortable at this moment. It was not because of Yuan Tianji's words that had distorted the truth, nor was it because of this letter that had tarnished his reputation. It was because Mu Tsunglan was deeply aware of the shocking effect this kind of letter would have after it was announced to the world. This kind of letter was enough to pull all those people who had not made up their minds and were still hesitating to the side of Yuan Tianji. Even in his own army, there would be many people who would waver and even officially abandon him. This was a psychological attack aimed at everyone in the world. This letter that seemed to be very humble actually had such a vicious effect. Xie Danqiong was silent for a moment, then said, I believe that this is only the beginning. Since Yuan Tianji has chosen to do this, he must have other backup plans. In the Heavenly Imperial Court, the extraterrestrial demons are always fighting in a foreign land. What other stronger backup plans can he have? Mu Tsunglan took a deep breath and frowned. Could it be that he can really summon a large number of demons to help him in the battle? If that's really the case, it would be a confession without being pressed and help us solve the predicament in front of us. Xie Danqiong clasped his hands behind his back. His handsome face was full of worry. He said lightly, It definitely won't be that simple. Let's wait and see. If my feeling is right, this world will become very interesting. It will be so interesting that you and I can't predict or imagine it at all. Mu Tsunglan was puzzled. At this moment, his mind was already restless. His usual calmness was gone. Xie Danqiong's heart, however, had an extremely bad feeling. It was a kind of flash of inspiration. It was indescribable and even hard to understand. Although the current situation was bad, it had not yet become clear. However, he could already faintly feel that there was an invisible net that was enveloping him. He seemed to be unable to break free. Although he knew that the Tianji Intelligence Department had released the news, he still didn't know that his brothers would all gather at Mo Yuntian in a short period of time. This was actually Jin Mo's idea. He wanted to give Xie Danqiong a surprise. However, it received the support of most of his brothers. Everyone wanted to see how Xie Danqiong's eternally handsome and calm face would suddenly be filled with ecstasy. What kind of expression would that be? That scene was simply irresistible and made one look forward to it. Although Chu Yang and Mo Tianji felt that it wasn't very good, they could only acquiesce to everyone's unanimous request. Therefore, Xie Danqiong was completely clueless about the next move of his brothers. Naturally, he didn't have much confidence in his heart. He only felt that he was facing the treacherous Mo Yuntian all by himself. He really felt a little lonely. But now that things had come to this, he couldn't give up easily. He persevered and walked straight down. No matter which battlefield it was, he had no reason to retreat. 3 days passed. The tide of public opinion in Mo Yuntian didn't weaken at all. Instead, it became more and more intense and out of control. Mu Tsunglan, it's already been 3 days. What do you say? Not saying a word. Are you trying to bluff your way through? Mu Tsunglan, His Majesty the Heavenly Emperor is so magnanimous to you. If you still don't mend your ways, you're worse than a pig or a dog. Mu Tsunglan, you must have a conscience. You can't be so shameless. Mu Tsunglan, how can you be so shameless? Brothers who join the Heavenly Armament Pavilion because of Mu Tsunglan quickly repent. Your families are waiting for you. Don't make a mistake that will lead to everlasting sorrow. Mu Tsunglan, you deserve to die 1,000 times for your crimes. Even 1,000 deaths won't be enough to atone for your crimes. Mu Tsunglan, you've let down His Majesty the Heavenly Emperor. You're ambitious. Even death can't wipe out your crimes. Mu Tianlan, you despicable person who deceives others. How do you still have the face to live in this world? Hurry up and kill yourself. Just when the tide of public opinion reached its peak, a 5-colored cloud suddenly floated over in the sky of Mo Yuntian. The colorful cloud hovered in the sky of Mo Yuntian for a long time. A voice, like a large bell, instantly spread throughout the mountains and rivers of Mo Yuntian. The sage has decreed. These 4 words were truly deafening, echoing in the entire ink cloud sky for a long time, endlessly. The entire ink cloud sky started to shake violently. The Lord Sage has finally appeared. After the commotion, everyone held their breaths and waited for the imperial edict. The decree of the Saint Emperor had always been the sacred and inviolable authority of the Heaven Imperial Court, the absolute authority of the Heaven Imperial Court. Xie Danqiong was tens of thousands of miles away at this moment. But he could still hear this voice. In fact, it felt as if it was transmitted right next to his ear. It's impossible for a person's voice to travel so far. There must be some special method. Xie Danqiong raised his eyebrows and said. However, the worried look in his eyes became even more obvious. Mu Tsunglan stroked his beard. He looked calm and composed, but the smile on his face had already turned stiff. Even his knuckles had turned white from nervousness. Chapter 2301. Yes, this is the Heavenly Sage's voice transmission that the Saint has set up in the various large realms. Every time he sends a message to Chao Yi, he uses this method. Mu Tsunglan's voice also seemed to have stiffened. He forced a laugh and said, But the Saint has issued a decree at this time. What does he want to do? When he said the last 3 words, Mu Tsunglan's voice also trembled a little. It was unknown whether it was from joy or fear. Xie Danqiong sighed and said, I'm afraid he might not be helping us. How can that be? The Saint will definitely not wallow in the mire with the heavenly demons. How can he not be helping us? Mu Tsunglan's voice carried a slight tremble. Although this sentence was said in a low voice, it already carried a kind of disbelief and a hint of hysteria. His words were not so much to explain to Xie Danqiong and give him confidence, but it could not be said that he was encouraging himself and raising his little remaining fighting spirit and confidence. If the Saint publicly supported Yuan Tianjie, then the injustice in his life would definitely be unable to be washed away. The shame in his life would also be unable to be washed away. Although his face was filled with indifference, in reality, he had already gathered all his energy and was trying his best to listen to that moment's announcement. Xie Danqiong sighed endlessly in his heart. He had a premonition that Mu Tsunglan would not only be disappointed this time, but would also be in despair. The Saint has issued a decree. After these 4 words, there was a long silence. Those 5 colored clouds wandered freely in the sky. Under the illumination of the vast sunlight, they emitted 5 colored rays that illuminated the heaven and earth. It was extremely sacred, extremely holy, extremely solemn, and extremely dreamy. Everyone had personally witnessed such an inviolable and unshakable sacred scene bestowed by the heavens. There are rebellions everywhere in dark cloud heaven. The people have no way to make a living. This seat is extremely angry. This was the first sentence of the saint's decree. It was very plain and very simple. But it had already expressed the emotions in the bottom of his heart. Everyone raised their heads in anticipation. You are angry? This can be understood and also allowed. But who exactly are you angry at? This was the main point. The dignified voice continued. Mo Yuntian's military commander, Mu Tsang-lan, was selfish and greedy. He acted recklessly without reason. He deceived the emperor, took bribes, and perverted the law. He was ambitious. I have long known the source of all this. But I did not expect that there would be a day when Mu Tsang-lan, for his own selfish desires, would do such a rebellious and ridiculous thing as framing a celestial emperor. This seat is truly heartbroken. Heavenly Emperor in Cloud, Yuan Tianji is this seat's lifelong best friend. This seat can guarantee that Yuan Tianji's background is clean and he's absolutely not a sky fiend. Rumor has it that he's a heavenly demon, but that's all nonsense and slander. Mu Tsang-lan is ambitious and has brought disaster to the world, implicating the common people. He is the traitor of Mo Yuntian and also the traitor of our Heaven Imperial Court. He is the source of all the chaos. Everyone has the right to punish him. The moment this sentence came out, the ground of the entire Mo Yuntian could feel an extremely strong vibration. Clearly, countless people were shocked by the content of these words. They couldn't help but leak out their cultivation. Too many people were shocked at the same time. So much so that the entire Mo Yuntian could feel this kind of vibration. The moment this sentence came out, Mu Tsang-lan's eyes were filled with stars. He didn't hear a single word of what the Saint Monarch said after the decree. He only felt that there was only a rumbling sound in his ears. He was originally standing upright to listen to the Saint Monarch's decree, but now, his tall and straight body gradually bent down. His entire person suddenly looked old and senile. It was as if in this instant, the millions of years that didn't leave behind any traces suddenly returned to his body. 1,000,000 years in an instant, 10,000 years in a breath. Commander Mu. A guard in front of him exclaimed. He rushed over and wanted to support Mu Tsang-lan. Heavens! Mu Tsang-lan suddenly looked up to the sky and cried out. Could it be that the Sky Fiend is really in power? Even the Saint Monarch has been deceived by him. Why? Why is this? Before he finished speaking, he already spat out a mouthful of blood with a pu sound. His tall and sturdy body fell down stiffly. Yuan Tianji was a Sky Fiend. This matter was already confirmed without a doubt. Other than the 2 kings of calligraphy and painting as proof, Yuan Tianji's most trusted aide, Prime Minister Luoyu, had also revealed the true body of a Sky Fiend. This was already irrefutable evidence. Even if the Saint Monarch didn't believe this, he should at least investigate carefully. After all, wind from an empty cave wasn't without cause. However, no one would have thought that the Saint Monarch actually didn't go through any investigation and directly came to such a conclusion. He directly nailed Mu Tsang-lan to the pillar of shame. He would never be able to rise again. Xie Danqiong stood alone in the wind. His long hair and white robe fluttered in the wind. His eyes seemed to be contemplating something, lost in thought. He faintly felt that perhaps it wasn't only Mo Yuntian that was about to change. Even the entire Heaven Imperial Court was about to change. With regards to Mu Tsang-lan's extreme anger and despair, how could Xie Danqiong not empathize with him? He was filled with emotions. He clearly understood what Mu Tsang-lan was thinking right now. However, Xie Danqiong didn't step forward to console him. At this time, any consolation would be pale, powerless, and completely meaningless. The Saint Monarch's decree was tantamount to the conclusion of everything. Looking at the ashen faces of the subordinates around him, Even the top-notch experts with extremely good temperament also had pale faces at this moment. It was obvious that everyone had a premonition that after the Saint Monarch's decree was passed down, what kind of storm was about to befall them. And what kind of tragic consequences would it bring? That was truly unimaginable. Or perhaps, it was completely unimaginable. Xie Danqiong took in a deep breath. His handsome face regained its calm. He even smiled faintly, reappearing his usual calmness. When the grave smile fell into the eyes of his subordinates, it was as if their perplexed hearts suddenly had a rare source of support. Mu Tsunglan had already been hit by this series of attacks. Then, he definitely couldn't fall again. "Pass down the order," Xie Danqiong said with a smile. His gaze was firm and sharp, shooting out like a sharp arrow towards the target. It was so cold and stern. "Pass down the order to the entire army to prepare for battle." Xie Danqiong slowly walked towards the military tent. "Tell them that following this, there will be an unprecedentedly fierce battle. It is about to begin. This time, it is the real battle of life and death." Xie Danqiong's guess was right. It was indeed a fierce battle. Moreover, internal and external troubles couldn't be stopped. The Saint Monarch's decree and Yuan Tianjia's letter. This double blow had almost turned the entire Moyun sky upside down. Right after the Saint Monarch's decree, Yuan Tianjia officially issued the order to suppress Mu Tsunglan. Although that order still expressed reluctance and regret, that soaring murderous intent was difficult to conceal. Or perhaps, it wasn't concealed at all. No matter who kills Mu Tsunglan, all of Mu Tsunglan's power, position, and title will be inherited by that person. Rebel soldiers and horses, if there are any defectors, their crimes will not be investigated. At this time, Moyun Sky was simply united as one, working together to suppress the rebels. More than half of the people supported the Moyun Sky's emperor, Yuan Tianjia. As for those who were still wavering, those who remained on the sidelines were also tempted by the conditions that Yuan Tianjia had promised them. As long as they killed Mu Tsunglan, they would become the new number one person in Moyun Sky's military. The first duke. The commander of all the troops. The power to rule the world. Under one person, above millions of people. What kind of status was this? What kind of glory was this? What kind of glory was this? It was too easy to just kill Mu Tsunglan to get all of this. Since it was so easy, why not do it? Countless people, who had been standing still and watching, were now shouting and rushing to the south. Yuan Tianjia personally took command and led the troops into battle. Yu Lai led the troops as the vanguard, commanding tens of millions of soldiers and horses. The troops were divided into 25 groups and set off in all directions at the same time. "Kill Mu Tsunglan! Invade my Moyun Sky!" The entire Moyun Sky was shouting this slogan. At the same time, at the Heavenly Armament Pavilion's camp, it was full of gloomy clouds. The series of events had caused a small portion of the soldiers who had followed Mu Tsunglan to be at a loss. Was it right or not? Was it right or not? What should they do? What was it? Countless people were thinking, deliberating, and weighing the pros and cons. Many of them gathered together and secretly talked about things that should be said and things that should not be said. The negative consequences of hastily starting things had finally completely erupted at this moment. Moreover, the undercurrent was surging violently. Everyone was well aware that an unforeseen event that no one could bear was silently brewing. But could it be that in the military camp, people were not allowed to interact with each other? Facing such a terrible situation, even a deity would be at his wits' end. Mu Tsunglan seemed to have aged hundreds of thousands of years in one night. His black hair had all turned snow white. Xie Danqiong sat beside Mu Tsunglan's bed with a calm smile on his face. The faces of Mu Tsunglan's trusted aides and generals were filled with worry. There were many unfavorable situations in their respective camps. The soldiers no longer had the will to fight, and the generals no longer had the will to fight. In fact, there was no lack of rebellious thoughts. Under such circumstances, how could they fight a war? The 25 armies on the other side had surrounded them from all directions. They had completely blocked all the loopholes and were coming to encircle and suppress them. Once the army arrived, they would be completely defeated without even fighting here. Right now, the majority of the people who followed Mu Tsanglan were unstable. On the other hand, the people of the Heavenly Armament Pavilion were still unmoved. They were originally rebellious. During this period of time, they seemed to have been rebellious for quite some time. Facing such a situation, they were used to it. There was even a bit of disdain. We've experienced this kind of battle too many times. What's the big deal? Ashamed? Mu Tsanglan sighed deeply. Chief Xie, facing the calmness of the Heavenly Armament Pavilion, our Tsanglan army, is truly ashamed. All the generals lowered their heads in shame. It was very strange at night. The computer suddenly could not be switched on. I wrote half a chapter and had no choice but to switch to another computer to write again. Chapter 2302. As a general, being unable to control his soldiers was the greatest humiliation. They were clearly a mixed army, but in the face of such a terrible situation, each and every one of them was calm and composed. But his own regular army was so incompetent. It was really. Don't you think that from a certain point of view, the current situation is actually a good thing? Xie Danqiong was still smiling. That calmness did not seem to be forced at all. Good thing? The generals frowned. How could it be a good thing in such a desperate situation? Where did the good come from? Mu Tsanglan frowned. His mind moved, and he silently pondered. Xie Danqiong said lightly, My original intention of establishing the Heavenly Armament Pavilion was not to rebel and become the Heavenly Emperor. It was to go to the outer realm and exterminate the demons. My battle with Mo Yuntian's army was mostly to train the soldiers. That's all. Xie Danqiong's face showed a trace of ridicule. And all of you, if you don't die in this battle, you will follow me in the future and go to the purple cloud heavens to restore the human homeland. Then, we will go on an expedition to the heavenly demons to exterminate them completely. This is my true intention, but it seems that the majority of people have misunderstood something. Xie Danqiong raised his head and smiled. This smile was so otherworldly, proud of the world. Mu Tsanglan and the other generals were shocked. Xie Danqiong's true ambition was actually here. To exterminate the heavenly demons. So, we really misunderstood something? The manpower we need to fight the heavenly demons has never been the masses, but elite soldiers. Xie Danqiong said lightly. His eyes flashed. We don't need those weak-willed mobs. Hearing this, all the generals lowered their heads in shame. Wasn't the current situation of their own army the unbearable behavior of a bunch of mobs? Although Xie Danqiong directly scolded everyone's faces, they really did not have any words to refute. This time, although we are jittery and in imminent danger, it is also a great opportunity to clean up our troops. Xie Danqiong said coldly. Isn't it a good thing to take this opportunity to eliminate all those who are not firm? Are we really going to let these people drag us down when we fight the extraterrestrial demons? One of the generals said worriedly. But those people were just deceived and didn't know the truth. Wasn't it a little unfair to kill them all with a single strike? I believe that they will not waver in their decision to fight the heavenly demons. Deceive? Waver? Xie Danqiong sneered. Can you explain the truth to them since they've been deceived? Let them no longer waver. The general was tongue-tied and didn't know how to continue. If he could tell the truth and had solid evidence, wouldn't he have been able to prove it long ago? Why would he be forced to such a state? Speaking of being deceived, speaking of being swayed, it's still because they can't completely trust Marshal Mu. Xie Danqiong sneered. If they truly trusted him, why would they be deceived? How could he be shaken? Since he couldn't trust him wholeheartedly, what was the point of keeping him? Do you dare to put your back in the hands of such a person? Xie Danqiong's smile was so sarcastic that it made people uncomfortable. If they can be deceived today, what if they are deceived in the future when they go to the battlefield of the purple cloud heavens? Can you guarantee that they won't be swayed in the future? If they are swayed, what's the use of your guarantee? Is there any meaning to it? Yuan Tianjie might just be a pawn of the extraterrestrial demons who sneaked into the heavenly imperial court. Maybe he has some status in the land of extraterrestrial demons, but how many extraterrestrial demons are there in the black cloud heavens now? It's just a letter, and it's enough to make everyone so divided. When we go to the purple cloud heavens with such a team, it's not killing demons, Xie Danqiong said heavily. It's just sending them to their deaths. They're sending food to the extraterrestrial demons. They're supporting the enemy with great fanfare. Mu Tsunglan's eyes flashed, and he said, Yes. What the chief said makes sense, Xie Danqiong said lightly. Everyone, go back now. Let those who are wavering leave by themselves. There's no need to dissuade or explain. In the current situation, even if you force yourself to stay, it's just a disaster. I believe that after this purge, those who are left are all hardcore elites, or at least people with strong wills. If we fight to the death, we might still have a chance of winning. But we must take note that we can't let those with ulterior motives stay. If that's the case, it's really over. After Xie Danqiong gave his instructions seriously, all the generals walked out quickly. This matter shouldn't be delayed. The sooner it was settled, the more room for maneuver. Marshal Mu, is it very uncomfortable? Xie Danqiong looked at Mu Tsunglan and asked. Sigh. Mu Tsunglan let out a long sigh. Even the Saint Monarch was, hee. Xie Danqiong said lightly. I don't understand. Why did you place all your hopes on the saint? Could it be that you're not going to kill the extraterrestrial demons after the saint was deceived? Of course we have to kill the extraterrestrial demons, Mu Tsunglan said angrily. Then, he sighed dejectedly. It's just that my heart can't accept it. Xie Danqiong said sarcastically. The situation now is really serious. Now, it's not just Mo Yuntian who needs us, but the entire Heaven Imperial Court needs us. If you're defeated here, you'll be the sinner of history. The sinner of the entire Heaven Imperial Court. Mu Tsunglan was shocked. You trust the saint so much, but the saint directly confirmed Yuan Tianjie's identity. Don't you feel that there's something strange about this? Xie Danqiong said coldly. Yuan Tianjie is an extraterrestrial demon. You and I know this very well. I believe that the higher-ups of the heavens might not be unaware of this. And the saint just had to express his position at this juncture. What do you think this means? If... Hee. Xie Danqiong sneered and got up to leave. I'm going to take a look at the army now. I'll try my best to get rid of the hidden dangers. If Marshal Mu still can't wake up, there's no harm in continuing to lie down. I'm going too. Mu Tsunglan rolled over and climbed up from the bed. Chief is right. How can I continue to lie down there? No matter what, I have to kill this demon Yuan Tianjie. Xie Danqiong smiled. The two walked out side by side for a long time before Mu Tsunglan said in a low but heavy voice. Thank you. Xie Danqiong smiled and floated away. A day later, Mu Tsunglan looked at the few generals who came to report the situation. He was speechless. His originally haggard face looked even more weary. Understanding some things was one thing, but truly accepting it was definitely not an easy thing. No matter how steady and experienced a person was, it was still the same. Over this day and night, the generals had all given their orders and allowed their subordinates to choose their own places to go. Now that the situation has reached this stage, Yuan Tianjie's prestige has already been deeply rooted in the hearts of the people. With the saint as his guarantee, his prestige is as strong as the sun. I'm sure everyone has doubts in their hearts. They don't know what their position is, whether it's right or wrong, whether it's good or evil. As the saying goes, don't use people you doubt, and don't use people you use. At this stage, even if we force everyone to stay together, it's meaningless. So if you have any thoughts, you can leave on your own. We definitely won't stop you, nor will we make things difficult for you. But if you have any thoughts of betrayal and want to capture Marshal Mu to gain merit and reward, I'll give you a word of advice. Don't act rashly. If you really act rashly, we'll be enemies and won't be merciful. That's all I have to say. If you want to leave, the camp's gates are already open. You can leave at any time. You can also take all the wealth you've earned. If your family is here, you can also take them with you. If we break off relations, we won't speak ill of you. If you want to leave, go ahead. But if you make a ruckus and act like you're filled with righteous indignation, you'll be killed without mercy." In the beginning, there were still people who were hesitant about whether to stay or leave. But when they saw the first person finally pack up and leave the camp, and when no one stopped him, this situation became a trend that was almost unstoppable. Countless soldiers rushed out like a tide. There were even many people who brought their families and left. In serious cases, some camps were emptied in an afternoon, leaving less than 10%. In the beginning, those who stayed were still cursing and trying to persuade those who wanted to leave to stay. But in the end, they were all stupefied. They could only watch as those old brothers of the past left resolutely. Their faces were filled with anger and sadness from the bottom of their hearts. It wasn't until the next morning that the wave gradually subsided and disappeared. But in one night, the Heavenly Armament Pavilion's forces were reduced by nearly 10%. The heavenly demons wreaked havoc and brought disaster to the Heavenly Imperial Court. I, Mu Tsung-lan, rose up to slaughter the demons. I had no selfish desires in my heart. I only wanted to quell the demons and pacify the Heavenly Imperial Court. From the hundreds of thousands who rushed out of the capital at the beginning, we once gathered 70 million soldiers. But the affairs of the world are like chess. Life is like a dream. It's easiest to wake up from a good dream. 70 million soldiers, and in 7 days more than half of them dispersed. Mu Tsung-lan laughed bitterly. Now there are less than 5 million left. He sighed, his face even more lonely. The generals under him bowed their heads in shame, speechless for a long time. 5 million. If this number was purely from a numerical point of view, it was actually not a small number. It was still a considerable number of forces. However, this depended on who it was compared to. Now Yuan Tianjie had personally led the army into battle. He had divided his troops into 25 groups, totaling up to 50 million soldiers. Moreover, there were still large numbers of reinforcements gathering at the rear. In addition, there were tens of millions of people who had defected from his side. And among these people, there would probably be many who would join Yuan Tianjie's side. Under such circumstances, the ratio of the military strength of both sides had almost reached a terrifying level of 1 to 50. In fact, this ratio had the possibility of increasing even further. Moreover, the morale on his side was unprecedentedly low. The soldiers had no fighting spirit, and the generals also did not have much fighting spirit. The atmosphere was dejected. How could they face the enemy? Chapter 2303. A motley crew! Truly a motley crew. What's the point of abandoning them? Xie Danqiong stood outside the door and said disdainfully, "Generals, immediately take your men and horses and go to the rear to protect your families. As for the front, let the original troops of the Heavenly Armament Pavilion take the lead. If we win, naturally everything will be forgotten. If we all die in battle, it's still not too late for you to surrender." These words were like a red-hot steel needle that pierced deeply into the hearts of the generals. Since when were they, the regular soldiers, looked down upon to such an extent by the leader of a motley crew? But wasn't this the truth? Wasn't it happening right now, right in front of their eyes? The generals were speechless for a moment. They didn't know what to say in rebuttal. "Nonsense!" Mu Tsung-lan stood up angrily. "Even when faced with a desperate situation, we still fight. For more than 1,000,000 years, we still fought bravely in desperate situations. When we fought for victory, we were no less than you, Chief Xie. How can you look down on the soldiers of Mo Yutian like this?" Xie Danqiong laughed coldly. "Look down. I look down on you. Ha! Why should I look up to you? Ask yourself, what do you have that's worth me looking up to? Just a little rebellion, and you're all defeated. Every one of you is like a rooster that has lost a battle. With your current conduct, you still want to lead troops. You still want to fight. You still want to slay demons. You still want to be heroes. That's just wishful thinking, a fantasy. Ha! Xie Danqiong's undisguised mocking laughter spread far and wide. It was heard far and near. His disdainful tone was thick and pervasive. Right now, I'm just regretting. Xie Danqiong laughed and left. I actually wasted so many days of food on a bunch of complete trash. His words faded away. Xie Danqiong had already soared into the air and went forward to organize the troops. He actually didn't give them any chance to refute. Such disdain, and even disregard, made the generals furious. It was really too much. Xie Danqiong's words are too much. A general slammed his palm on a chair, causing it to shatter. He was furious, his face turning purple, and his heart thumped. The others also could not tolerate such humiliation. Their breathing was heavy, and their eyes were bloodshot. Mu Tsanglan coldly snorted. What are you shouting for? Could it be that he was wrong about you? Have you done anything that you think highly of? Didn't you guys break down when he said that it wasn't the truth? He didn't collapse from the setback? Even I feel ashamed for you all. Hearing this, all the generals were stunned, not knowing how to react. Mu Tsanglan said loudly, There is nothing wrong with you wanting others to look up to you. But what are you going to use to make others look up to you? Just because he didn't do anything? Who would think highly of you if you didn't have any military achievements? Since the reality is like this, don't blame others for looking down on you. If you want others to look down on you, then you have to show them what you can do. You're just screaming here. Not only do people look down on you, even I look down on you. If you don't show us what you can do. Mu Tsanglan snorted coldly. It's just as Chief Xie said. We've really wasted these days' worth of food. Even if we raise a pig, we can still kill it and eat it. But raising you guys is just raising a bunch of trash. You're a complete piece of trash. Completely useless. After saying this, Mu Tsanglan flicked his sleeves and entered the inner hall. The generals looked at each other, feeling as if their chests were about to explode. They had lived for a lifetime, but they had never been looked down on like this. If they did not show some methods, would they be looked down on like this? Wasn't a person's life just a breath of air? Not a steam bun fighting for air. The generals rushed out of their tents like a hurricane, their faces as black as the bottom of a pot. They returned to their camps and began to gather their troops. Each of them was like a dragon, emitting a fiery aura that could explode at any time. Mu Tsanglan was in the inner hall, observing all the changes with his divine sense. He finally let out a sigh of relief. This time, the provocation was very successful. Previously, it was Mu Tsanglan and Xie Danqiong who had teamed up to provoke the generals. These generals were all good. Not only were they experts, but they were also experts in the art of war. They were all experts in war, and the only thing they lacked was fighting spirit. However, this kind of decadent atmosphere was too strong. Although they were still determined to follow Marshal Mu, their fighting spirit had been completely destroyed by this series of blows. If they did not get rid of the negative effects and reinvigorate their fighting spirit, this battle would be lost without even fighting. Mu Tsanglan naturally knew that the generals who had followed him for many years were not cowards. But the problem was that if the soldiers under their command lost their fighting spirit, no matter how strong the general was, he could not do anything. But to reinvigorate the atmosphere, he still had to start with these generals. If the soldiers were decadent, it would only waste time and everything would be delayed if he tried to persuade them one by one. But if the general was extremely angry, it would affect the situation of the entire army. The general had been instilled with anger and had nowhere to vent it. Thus, he went back and instilled even more anger into his subordinates. And the officers would pass it down level by level. By the time they reached the lowest level, they were basically bursting with anger. Just like now, when a soldier made a mistake, the regiment commander would never directly punish the soldier. Instead, he would punish the battalion commander would punish the company commander, and the company commander would punish the platoon leader. But when the platoon leader and squad leader punished the soldier, it would be even more severe. It was guaranteed that the person who made the mistake would not dare to do it again. This was the method of the commander. However, the prerequisite for achieving this goal was to provoke the anger of these generals. Otherwise, everything would just be empty talk. So, Mu Tsanglan and Xia Danqiong had teamed up to lead this show of ignoring. So, the roars of the generals could be heard everywhere in the camp. Damn it! We are being looked down upon! Brothers, we are all being looked down upon. All of you, raise your heads. You. It's because of you bastards. Look at what you are doing. Fuck you. No wonder people keep pointing at our noses and saying that we are trash who waste food by raising us. Look at you cowards. You don't deserve to be called soldiers. We are all being dragged down by trash like you. Trash, you are all trash. We really have no face to see people. If you don't do something, we are going to commit suicide. Fuck. Isn't it just a few fucking soldiers who ran away? Look at you cowards. Fuck. We will also look down on you. Wasting food. Fuck, we are right to scold you. Even a dog knows how to fucking guard the house. Fuck, look at you, you are not even as good as a dog. A wave of angry curses covered the sky and covered the earth. All the soldiers' eyes were spitting fire. Looking at the general who was shouting and scolding on the high platform, they wished they could pull him down and beat him up. What are you looking at? Is what we said wrong? Not convinced? Then follow us and make a good one. Fuck. Say, what should we do? I'll let you say it yourselves. Fuck. We can't take this lying down. We can't take it no matter what. Nothing to say, fuck. Fuck them. Let them see that we are not cowards. There is not a single coward. Millions of soldiers roared at the same time. Their voices rose and fell continuously, shaking the mountains and valleys until rocks fell. Wind and thunder surged in the sky. Everyone's faces were red and their hearts were beating so fast that they felt like they were going to explode. Good. Then fuck. 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 Fuck them. Their cries resounded through the sky. All the officers and soldiers in the camp went crazy. Mu Tsanglan finally revealed his first smile in the past few days. It was a smile that he had not seen for a long time. In the army, being gentle and refined would not work. Even a Confucian scholar would become vulgar in a short period of time after entering the army. As a general once said, "If you are not vulgar, how can you make the army howl?" The army was not a school. It was not something that could be conquered by poetry. It depended on blood. It depended on killing, on life. It was never an exam. Motherfucker. Xia Danqiong stood in the clouds, thousands of feet above the ground. But he could still clearly hear the roars coming from the ground. That was Mu Tsanglan's army carrying out the final reorganization. In the past few days, the morale of the army had not only been raised, but it had also far exceeded Xia Danqiong's expectations. Now, every soldier was like a bomb that was about to explode. They would explode at the slightest touch. This kind of state was like a rubber band that was stretched to the extreme. One could imagine that once a battle broke out, these people would throw themselves in without any hesitation. They would kill crazily and would not stop until they died. In the distance, in a very distant place, one could see dust and smoke rising into the sky, almost covering the entire sky. The flames of war were already in front of their eyes. Perhaps tomorrow, or perhaps the day after, the first battle would take place. In the face of such an army, all the ambushes and arrangements were just a joke. Every soldier could come and go as they pleased. What was the point of an ambush, whether it was a fire attack, a water attack, or a trap? Everyone had their own divine sense. If it was an expert, with a simple sweep of his divine sense, he would not miss anything in a radius of hundreds of miles. How could there be an ambush? There were even some experts who could not die after their physical body was destroyed. Only by destroying their primordial spirit would they be able to completely destroy their opponent. In the face of such an enemy, the only way was to fight with brute force. Xie Danqiong's expression was still calm as he looked at the rising dust and smoke thousands of miles away, slowly approaching. Chapter 2304. He could clearly see that the sky he was in was slowly shrinking at a rate visible to the naked eye. Xie Danqiong was still unmoved. This period of suppression, hard work, and struggle had made Xie Danqiong completely mature. The current Xie Danqiong was no longer the little brat when he first came to the Heaven Palace. He was a qualified commander. He was fully qualified to take charge of an area alone. He could even handle it with ease. Facing a huge number of enemies that were dozens of times more powerful than his own side, Xie Danqiong was extremely calm from start to finish. There was no fluctuation in his emotions at all. The Tianji Intelligence Department sent over the latest news one after another. There was a detailed report on the route of the enemy's 25 troops, including the commander, deputy commander, vanguard of each troop, the allocation of troops, and the supply of food. The level of detail in this report had reached the point of being meticulous. Xie Danqiong held it in his hand and looked at it carefully. His expression did not change. A figure suddenly flashed by beside him. Mu Tsunglan appeared beside him. They are basically at the limit now. The purity of the army is sufficient, and their morale is also very high. Although the number of troops available is much less, their hearts have truly settled down. At least they do not need to worry about any sudden negative situations. Xie Danqiong smiled faintly. Have they truly settled down? I'm afraid they have completely given up? Mu Tsunglan smiled bitterly. Why say it so badly? The truth is really very hurtful. He paused and said, The enemy is currently within 1,000 miles of the main camp. They are currently surrounding us from all sides. It seems that this battle will begin in a day or two. Xie Danqiong nodded. That's right. We have already made preparations on our side. It's just a battle, nothing more. Mu Tsunglan's spirit shook. I hope that this battle will be able to conquer Cloud Sky. Xie Danqiong laughed and handed over the report in his hand. I, as an outsider, am really not familiar with these people. It's better for you to take charge of the arrangements for this battle. Mu Tsunglan took the thick stack of papers and only flipped through the first few pages. He actually sucked in a breath of cold air with a hiss. Where did you get such detailed information from? Is it reliable? Mu Tsunglan raised his head and asked almost instinctively. He couldn't help but be surprised. If the two armies had about the same number of people, then the fact that he had such information in his hands meant that he would win. This kind of information was enough to overturn the difference in strength between two armies of similar strength. I have my own channels, Xie Danqiong indifferently said. This information is absolutely reliable. It was completely real. I can guarantee that this is absolutely true. Mu Tsunglan took a deep breath and said, Since that's the case, I'll have to make a good plan. With this thing, we might be able to give Yuan Tianming a show of strength and boost our morale. His face was filled with intense hatred and fighting spirit, as well as a faint sigh. As the great battle unfolded, the ones who died from beginning to end were all in Cloud Sky experts. As for Skyfiends, they would not die. Wouldn't it make people sigh and wring their wrists if they fought against each other and killed each other? Xie Danqiong's calm gaze was fixed on his face. He said softly, If you don't harden your heart at this time, what if the heavenly devil really sweeps over the world? Mu Tsunglan let out a long sigh. That night, Mu Tsunglan only had 50,000 elite troops, but all the experts were sent out. They split into 25 groups to cut off the supply route of Yuan Tianming's army. After a night of fierce fighting, 7 of the supply routes were burned and the supply routes were cut off. However, the remaining 18 failed. The generals under Yuan Tianming's command were all veterans of war. When marching to war, the supply route was the key to military strategy. How could they not pay attention to this? Experts could go without eating for a long time, but if a high-intensity battle broke out, eating was the most effective way to replenish the blood loss. The supply route was undoubtedly the most important point. When the people who went to ambush returned, they also reported a new situation. General, the soldiers who left our side found a large number of corpses several thousand li away. Mu Tsang-lan suddenly stood up. Corpses? And a large number? Yes. Just the group we found had 7,000 to 8,000 people. Even the women and children were not spared. They all died at their hands. Yes, General Mu. We also found them here. However, that area is already tightly sealed off by the enemy. We have no way to investigate further. We don't know how many people died. That's right. We also have a similar situation on our side. Mu Tsang-lan sat down dejectedly. Who would have thought that those people would abandon them and go to their deaths? Furthermore, it was very likely that they would be captured without putting up a fight. He really didn't think that Yuan Tianming would be so merciless towards people who betrayed him. He himself had once made a promise before. Those who realize their mistakes and turn back will be reinstated, and no punishment will be meted out. They actually didn't abide by it at all. At this moment, this sentence was a complete joke. He didn't even plan to let these people turn around and attack him. He just executed them all. Right now, everyone is scolding us for being hypocrites. Since we let them go, we chased them down and killed them all. The scout who said this had a face full of anger. The veins on his forehead were throbbing. Because everyone knew that this matter was definitely not done by the Heavenly Armament Pavilion. Ever since those people left that day, the Heavenly Armament Pavilion had been heavily surrounded. Even when they went out to scout for information, they had to be careful. They didn't dare to act rashly, for fear of being caught carelessly and affecting the overall situation. What's more, they killed their former comrades on such a large scale. What's more, it was such a scattered massacre. But now, this basin of dirty water had been ridiculously splashed onto the innocent people. Mu Tsang-lan let out a long sigh, his expression extremely sorrowful. Those people who left either didn't know the truth, or they had other plans, so they left us. But in essence, those people were loyal and righteous people. Most of the original intentions of their uprising were still only to repay Mo Yuntian and quell the demon disaster. Who would have thought that Yuan Tianji would actually go back on his word and kill them all without any sense of morality? He truly has the ambition of a wolf. At this point, he only felt an indescribable pain in his heart. He couldn't control himself. All the generals fell into silence. When those people left, they were filled with hatred and resentment. Many of them even fought and cursed loudly because of that. But now, after hearing the grievous news, there was no longer any hatred in their hearts. There was only sadness and anger. The most tragic thing in life was to be deceived and deceived by the strange races. After serving them for so many years, they still died unjustly. Even until death, they didn't know the truth. They were kept in the dark from beginning to end. And those people who left could be said to be the true portrayal of this situation. The dawn of the day finally arrived amidst an unusually depressing atmosphere. Reporting, the enemy is already within 300 li of the main camp. Reporting, the enemy is less than 100 li away from the main camp. Reporting, the enemy is about 50 li away from the main camp. Reporting, the enemy has begun to set up camp. Only when the enemy was 50 li away from the main camp did Mu Tsang-lan finally make a new move. He silently sent out a large army, directly behind him, as if he wanted to break out of the encirclement. All of his men and horses began to madly attack the army behind him. The effect of this wave of attacks was very obvious. The army in the attack range had a total of 400,000 to 500,000 men and horses, and they were stunned on the spot. The general leading this army was originally Mu Tsang-lan's subordinate. The reason why he chose this side to attack was because Mu Tsang-lan had a deep understanding of him. The leader of the army was brave and fierce, but his planning was lacking. Every time the army set up camp during a long journey, it was his greatest weakness. Often, at this time, the entire army would fall into a certain state of chaos. They would need a buffer time to reorganize. And Mu Tsang-lan had chosen this time to attack. It could be said that he had hit the weak spot. When Yuan Tianji's army received the news of the attack, the battle here had already reached its end. Mu Lan's army had already retreated. All that was left were poisonous traps all over the place. In the first wave of contact, Mu Lan's side could be said to have obtained a complete victory. But the other side clearly didn't care much about this setback. They didn't even say anything. That night, they quietly set up camp, burying pots and cooking rice. It was an unprecedented tranquility, as if nothing had happened. Xie Danqiong's army had originally wanted to wait for an opportunity to attack. He wanted to take advantage of the enemy's unstable situation to catch them off guard. If the other side launched a large-scale rescue operation, then he could follow the strategy that he had long planned and deal a heavy blow to the enemy. This would make this battle a good start, and further raise his own morale. At the very least, he could add an indelible lesson to Yuan Tianjia's side. The battle situation would no longer be one-sided. But Xie Danqiong didn't expect that the other side would hold back and only send out tens of thousands of reinforcements symbolically. The headquarters was abnormally calm and almost didn't move at all. In the face of such a battle, only sending out tens of thousands of reinforcements. It didn't seem like a rescue operation at all. It couldn't even be considered half-hearted. It was like sending people to collect corpses. Xie Danqiong waved his hand and stopped this operation. His face was solemn as he said, "Fight steadily and surely." The other side's calmness was beyond his expectations. If he forced himself to attack, it would only lead to the opposite result. A very bad premonition welled up in Xie Danqiong's heart. Chapter 2305. The other side was not in a hurry at all, not in a hurry at all. The current situation was more like a long war of attrition. The other side's tens of millions of troops were arriving endlessly, surrounding this 10,000 li area. It was like an iron bucket, impenetrable. But they were not in a hurry to attack. Instead, they started fighting on a small scale every day. Of course, each battle had hundreds of thousands of people, so it wasn't a small-scale battle. But the battlefield was single and unshakable. Even Mu Lan was dumbfounded by this kind of fighting style. No one in the world had ever fought a battle like this before. This was using the lives of the soldiers as a joke. Yuan Tianjia was personally leading this battle, so how could he make such a low-level mistake? Yuan Tianjia's tent took up a vast area, and the decorations inside were even more magnificent. It was almost like a small imperial palace. Although it was a temporary palace, the ground was covered with a white bearskin carpet, and the surroundings were even more extravagant. Yuan Tianjia was comfortably high up, lying on his side, extremely leisurely. "Your Majesty!" Yu Chang hurriedly came in with an anxious expression. "Your Majesty, this battle cannot be fought like this. Mu Lan is a sly old fox and is resourceful. If we continue to delay like this, I'm afraid that a long night will bring many dreams." Before Yuan Tianjia could speak, Prime Minister Iluwa suddenly raised her head and shouted, "Shut up! His Majesty's decision is reasonable. You just need to follow the plan, there is no need to speak more." But like this, Yu Qi was also someone who understood war. How could he not know that this was nonsense? It would leave countless opportunities for the other side to exploit. But facing the Prime Minister's knife-like gaze, he couldn't speak for a moment. Above, Yuan Tianjia was still lying on his side, not paying any attention. "Quickly leave!" Iluwa shouted sternly. "Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes." Yu Lai lowered her head and left gloomily. "Didn't you say? His Majesty is inside, no one is allowed to disturb him?" Iluwa shouted coldly. "Who is on duty outside?" "This." The guard at the door was uneasy. "This lowly one thinks that Marshal Yu must have something important to discuss with His Majesty on the battlefield. This, drag him away. Execute them," Iluwa ordered coldly. "If anyone dares to offend us again, their entire family will be exterminated." Outside there was a sound of agreement, and endless pleas for mercy. However, after a scream, everything returned to silence once more. Iluwa scrutinized the large tent that only Yuan Tianjia and herself were in. An unusually cold smile appeared at the corner of her mouth. A wisp of faintly discernible green smoke slowly sneaked into the tent, and then quietly entered Yuan Tianji's body. Heavenly Emperor Mo Yun, who had been lying on his side, finally sat up at this moment and coughed softly. Although it was only a soft sound, it was filled with an inexplicable majesty. Yilue narrowed her eyes and smiled. Your Majesty, you have gained a lot this time, right? Yuan Tianjie smiled faintly. He stood up and slowly walked around the large tent a few times. He said, This time, this Emperor's origin spirit left my body to collect the murderous aura contained in the remnant souls. It is indeed quite effective, allowing my injuries to recover a little. I believe that if I do it a few more times, my injuries from before will improve greatly. Yilue said, The war has just begun. There is still a long way to go. Your Majesty need not be impatient. You should focus on your divine body. As long as there is merit, not only will your injuries improve, even a complete recovery will not be difficult. There are so many people in this heaven imperial court. Haha! The white-haired and stooped old prime minister's laughter at this moment seemed particularly wretched and vicious. Yuan Tianji smiled, and then frowned, saying, That is indeed the case, but I still don't understand one thing. Our clan can absorb the soul power of the human race, but why can we only use it to heal our injuries? Why can't it be used to increase cultivation? Logically speaking, such a thing is absolutely impossible. As long as there is energy that can heal injuries, it can definitely be used to restore one's cultivation. An energy that can increase cultivation may not be able to heal injuries. This is reasonable. Yuan Tianji frowned and thought hard. This reason is really puzzling. Yilue hesitated for a moment before narrowing her eyes. Your Majesty, I think I may be able to give you an answer to this. Yuan Tianji frowned. Oh? The Heavenly Demon clan had been puzzled by this question for generations. Yilue actually had an answer here? Cough, cough. Yilue coughed a few times, as if she found it difficult to speak. These years I have been researching this topic. For this, I have killed more than 3 million humans. Apart from humans, I have also killed more than 3 million clansmen. Yuan Tianji's expression did not change at all. His emotions did not seem to fluctuate at all, and he merely hummed softly. Oh? I compared these bodies from front to back. Every inch of them was carefully compared. In the end, I couldn't find any differences. In the end, I dismembered the living people and experimented on their bodies to find the differences. Finally, I found out that although the structure of our clansmen looked the same, there were still differences in the bones. We are able to absorb their soul energies to heal our injuries, but we cannot increase our cultivation. This is the most likely reason. Yilue said. Yuan Tianji's interest was immediately piqued when he heard this. He asked, Tell me specifically, what exactly are the differences? Yilue had killed almost 10 million beings for this research, and even used corpses for comparison. The cruelty was enough to make one's hair stand on end. And yet, Yuan Tianji did not feel that anything was wrong. Instead, he was very interested. When humans are filled with negative emotions such as fear, and pain, something special would appear in their bodies and blood, but we sky demons do not have such changes. Yilue frowned. I once implanted such things into the bodies of my clansmen, but it was useless. I can only conclude that such things are unique to humans and cannot be replicated. Another thing is that the structure of the human brain is slightly different from our clansmen's. The third difference is that the so-called immortal elites would have their souls formed after their physical bodies died, and their souls would be completely different from the demon embryos that we sky demons form under the same circumstances. There is a fundamental difference. The demon embryos that our clansmen form when they are on the brink of death are filled with the aura of destruction, while the human embryos are filled with vigor. Even the weakest of souls are brimming with life. Yilue spoke slowly. With so many differences, we can be sure that while we can use the soul strength of humans, it is only limited to making up for our own shortcomings and healing our injuries. However, if we want to use such power to cultivate and improve our cultivation, We do not have the same body structure, so it cannot be done. This may be a joke arranged by the gods, and is not something that can be changed by humans. Iluowa concluded. So that's how it is. Yuan Tianji came to a realization and said, Prime Minister, you must have put in a lot of effort to research this over the years? How many clansmen have you killed? How could there be so many clansmen to kill? Iluowa chuckled. Speaking of this, it's actually not that difficult. Your Majesty knows that I have to go back to my clan every few years, and each time, I bring a large number of clansmen and pretend to be captives. Haha, they only thought that they came with me to achieve great things and overthrow the imperial court, but in reality, they have all become my experimental subjects. In order to achieve great things, some sacrifices are unavoidable. There is a saying in the human race that I agree with: those who achieve great things do not bother about trifles. Yuan Tianji's face twitched, and he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. I was wondering why those fellows all disappeared one by one. It turns out that they were all cut off by you. However, this isn't right either. After so many years, at least 20 million people have come. Could it be that you cut them all? Iluowa scratched her head in embarrassment. Yes, I. Yuan Tianji's eyes widened, and he was speechless at this fact. After a long time, he laughed bitterly. No wonder you didn't dare to say anything about this, and always tried to cover it up and change the topic. So you really killed them all. Sigh, this is really a troublesome matter. That's the nephew of His Majesty the Sky Demon King, and the grandson of the Western Heaven Demon King. You are really audacious. Iluowa lowered her head and also laughed bitterly. This is also very hard to say. In order to make the results of the experiment comprehensive, we can't find anything from the bodies of ordinary sky demons. Only these direct descendants of the demon kings can represent the origin of the demons and see the difference more clearly. I only found out that there were such people after I killed them. Sigh. These demon king majesties, each and every one of them wanted their own grandchildren to develop themselves and make great contributions anonymously. Then, when they asked for rewards, they would give them a surprise. But they didn't know that this would only harm me. Iluowa sighed. You were the one who killed them first. Yuan Tianji glared at him and said with a headache. Okay, let's put this matter aside and don't mention it again in the future. When I see the two demon kings in the future, I'll directly say that they died in battle. As for this discovery, let's never mention it again. Iluowa nodded. Also, their coffins of martyrs still need to be prepared and sent back when the time comes. Yuan Tianji waved his hand in annoyance. This subordinate has already prepared them. The Prime Minister lowered his head, knowing that he had done something wrong. Yuan Tianji suddenly smiled strangely. Prime Minister, don't you think the humans should give you the title of Demon Slayer? The number of our clansmen who died in your hands is probably no less than tens of millions. Even Zihao may not have killed more people than you. Chapter 2306. Yuan Tianji nodded and said, The war must be delayed as much as possible. The more people die, the better. If we keep fighting like these few days, I believe that in another 10 days my injuries will be almost completely healed. That damned book fanatic! He actually caused my spiritual and soul power to suffer such heavy injuries. Iluowa said calmly, I will order Yu Qi to continue to send troops to fight and create a large number of casualties on both sides. Not only were generals like Yu Qi and Mu Tsanglan unable to understand what was going on, but even the soldiers who had just joined the army were also unable to understand what was going on. In any case, every day after that, hundreds of thousands of troops would be fighting in pairs. Yu Qi only sent troops from one direction to fight every day, and the tens of millions of troops in the other directions were all biding their time. Anyone who acted rashly would be killed without mercy. This made his own troops grumble to the heavens. They couldn't understand at all. If they attacked together, no matter how stubborn the other side was, they would all be dealt with within a few days. But using this kind of fighting method was simply adding fuel to the fire. Yu Qi, You can't be a spy from Mu Tsung Lan's side, right? But on the other side, Mu Tsung Lan and Xie Danqiong were also depressed. In order to prepare for this big battle, the surrounding ground was filled with countless vicious traps. Even the heart of each tree was hollowed out and filled with explosives and poisonous smoke. All the ambushes were arranged perfectly and flawlessly. But all the ambushes were still built on one foundation. When the enemy attacked from all directions at the same time, they would be launched at the same time. Only in this way could they inflict heavy damage to the enemy on a large scale. But fighting like this now, those ambushes were completely useless, because at most, they would only be able to detonate the ambushes on one side. The other sides would be completely wasted. Not to mention the minimal effect, they would also expose their final trump card. How could they be worthy of the huge manpower and resources they had invested in so many days? Besides, there was a huge disparity in the actual strength of the two armies. If those ambushes were useless, how could their side continue fighting? They were completely not the enemy's match. But now, the enemy was calmly attacking like a master, neither fast nor slow. It was like boiling a frog in warm water. What exactly is Yuan Tianjie planning? Mu Tsung Lan frowned and paced back and forth in the commander's tent. It's not a large-scale attack. Nor did they send out experts to attack. Every day, they use ordinary troops to attack our elites. It's simply sending them to their deaths. Could it be that they want to borrow my hand to destroy Mo Yintian's military power? But that shouldn't be the case. As long as he was still the Celestial Emperor, all of this power belonged to him. How could he sacrifice all of this power? But if that wasn't the case, then why? I don't get it. Even though Mu Tsung Lan had followed Yuan Tianming for 1,000,000 years, he was still completely confused. Xie Danqiong sat quietly at the head of the table. He didn't say a word. He looked like a stone statue. In his heart, he was thinking about the strange battle situation over the past few days. He faintly had a guess. However, there were too many things happening at the moment. He could not figure out what exactly had gone wrong. Reporting. Yu Lai has sent people to attack again. Mu Tsung Lan let out a long sigh and said, "Let General Luo lead the troops to meet the enemy. General Ho has fought for an entire day today, and the soldiers are already very tired. Withdraw and rest well." The messenger received the order and left. Not long after, the sound of fighting could be heard from outside. The sound shook the surroundings and lingered on. Mu Tsung Lan's face was even more worried. He sighed and said, "This battle is really terrible. No matter who wins or loses in the end, the ones who die are actually my Mo Yintian's great men. But now, we have no choice but to fight. What's happening in front of us is really regrettable." A general beside him also nodded repeatedly. If the souls of the heroes who died in the battle on the other side know that they died for the sake of the heavenly demon, even if their souls return to the spring, it would be difficult for them to feel at ease. "What did you say?" Xie Danqiong, who was thinking, suddenly stood up. He looked at General Ma, who had just spoken. His expression was somewhat frightening. General Ma was shocked by Xie Danqiong's sudden reaction. I didn't say anything, hero soul. Spirit. Spring. Xie Danqiong only felt a flash of inspiration in his mind. He instantly remembered the scene of the fierce battle with the heavenly demon on the Chongtian continent. He couldn't help but pat his forehead and said, I see. The truth is actually so simple. I actually only thought of it now. Chief, have you thought of something? Mu Tsung Lan's eyes were dignified. The reason why Yuan Tianjie didn't attack and only used a small-scale battle, I think I already know. Xie Danqiong said slowly. Oh, then what's the reason? Is there a hidden conspiracy? There is indeed a hidden conspiracy, but it has nothing to do with the battle. In the rebellion of the Seven Kings, although Yuan Tianjie killed the Seven Kings, he inevitably suffered heavy injuries. Xie Danqiong said slowly. I heard that if the heavenly demon's divine soul is damaged, he can use a large number of human souls as a sacrifice to absorb soul energy to heal his own injuries. Now, It must be because Yuan Tianjia's own soul is damaged and can't recover in a short time, so he used this method of using human souls to heal himself. If it really was a large-scale battle, although more people would die, Yuan Tianjia may not be able to absorb a large amount of soul energy. He can only watch as a large amount of soul energy is lost. Now it's only a small-scale battle, and the location is relatively close. Yuan Tianjia can eat to his heart's content and use the soul energy of the dead to heal his injuries. Xie Danqiong sighed. I should have thought of it. Yuan Tianjia used such a strange battle strategy to absorb soul energy to heal his injuries. Everyone was shocked when they heard this. They were furious again. Is this true? Mu Tsanglan was furious. It's absolutely true. Xie Danqiong nodded heavily. I dare to guarantee that this is absolutely true. It's not a lie. Damn Yuan Tianjia. Damn heavenly demon. Mu Tsanglan stood up and pointed to the sky, cursing loudly. Everyone was cursing nonstop. So, the final result of this battle will only benefit that demon Yuan Tianjia. If Yuan Tianjia asks Yuqi to come and challenge us again, do we still have to fight? A general was worried and angry. But if we don't fight, are we going to wait for death? Mu Tsanglan was distressed. I really didn't expect Yuqi to be such a bastard. He's usually a flatterer, and has a low moral standing. But at such a critical moment, he's actually willing to help the heavenly demon, and send his comrades to the battlefield to their deaths to become soul energy to nourish the heavenly demon. He's really worse than a dog or a pig. He's really crazy. Although they were cursing, they were helpless in the face of this thorny problem. Sometimes, after knowing the truth, facing the truth was even more difficult and helpless than when they didn't know the truth. If we fight, the death toll will definitely continue to increase, and there will be more soul energy for Yuan Tianjia to absorb and recover from his injuries. But if we don't fight, we can't just wait to be captured. With the current camp, if the enemy forces charge, the so-called fortifications will just be a joke. They won't be able to withstand a single blow. Mu Tsanglan slammed his fist on the table. How can such a thing happen? How can there be such an evil race in the world? We can't advance or retreat like this. Are they trying to suffocate us to death? It's a pity that my brother isn't here. Xie Danqiong sighed softly and said, My brother is most proficient in formations. He can summon the power of heaven and earth with the help of formations. If he's here, he only needs to set up a wind-guiding formation and attract a gale to completely blow away the newly formed soul energy. Yuan Tianjia won't have anywhere to absorb it. Wind? Mu Tsanglan's eyes lit up as he looked up. Can we use the power of an expert to artificially create a gale? Will this be effective? Mu Tsanglan asked. This might work, but I'm afraid that the enemy will also send experts of the same level to interfere. The results will be minimal. Xie Danqiong frowned. But right now, we don't have a better idea. We can only use this method to deal with the current situation. I'll arrange it. No matter what, we can't just watch the heavenly demon wreak havoc and devour the souls of the heroes. Mu Tsanglan said in a low voice. The battle on the second day went on as usual. However, there were a few more ambushes in the sky. A few saints under Mu Tsanglan's command stood high up in the sky. When the battle started, they seemed to have gone crazy. Each of them swung the branches of a large tree to create an artificial gust of wind. The sound was terrifying and deafening. It blew sand and stones into the air and made people lose their balance. Could it be that these people are so bored that they have nothing better to do? Have they become stupid? Yu walked out of the tent and looked up. He was puzzled. Waving a tree to create a gale. Can it kill people? What a joke. The people around him laughed. Commander, it seems like Mu Tsanglan's side is about to collapse. They actually did something so bizarre. They really don't know what they're talking about. Ha! Yuqi also laughed heartily. Just as he was laughing, the Prime Minister's gloomy voice suddenly sounded by his ear. Immediately send people to chase those crazy fellows up their way, the sooner the better. Immediately. Yu was stunned. What was going on? What kind of explanation was this? Could it be that when the other party was crazy, they had to follow suit? This. Waving a tree was just whipping the air, but it was really crazy. What are you waiting for? The Prime Minister's tone was extremely strict. You shuddered. He did not dare to delay and immediately ordered. Quickly send a few experts to chase those fellows in the sky away. The generals who were laughing suddenly froze. What? They want us to go crazy too? There's something going on today. A book friend from Sangzhou brought his father to Jinan to see a doctor. They encountered some difficulties and contacted me. I'll go to Jinan Provincial Hospital. I'll make up for it tomorrow. Chapter 2307. What? You want us to go and have a stroke too? Didn't you just say that those people were idiots? Now you actually changed your mind and want us to go and be idiots too? And you changed it without batting an eyelid. First, you scolded them for being idiots, and then you told your subordinates to go and have a stroke too, just this level. Compared to Commander Mu in the past, the difference was not just a little bit. The difference was like heaven and earth. The difference was like heaven and earth. Fuck, are you lie, playing with us? Why aren't you all going? Don't make any mistakes. Yu Lai also knew that the difference in his performance before and after was too great. He was feeling a little embarrassed. Seeing that the generals were stunned, he couldn't help but roar in anger. Yes! Although the generals were cursing in their hearts, they had no choice but to obey. He was the commander now. If they didn't obey, it would be disobeying a military order. That was a crime punishable by death. No matter how afraid they were, they still jumped up. Hey, what the hell is going on over there? Hurry up and scram, save us the trouble. Those people naturally knew what they were doing. It was of great significance. How could they be willing to leave? After a few words, the two sides really got into a fight. In an instant, the two sides of the battlefield were ignited at the same time. The people on Mu Tsung Lan's side knew what they were doing and naturally did their best to stop the Sky Demon's scheme. But the people on Yu Lai's side didn't know what was going on. The purpose of the battle was especially unclear. This was undoubtedly a huge difference. Therefore, the consequences quickly appeared. Often, after the strong winds from both sides were released, they were cleverly guided to the sky above the battlefield. Huff, huff, huff. The effect was quite good. It seemed to be even better than simply using a tree to create a whirlwind. Yuan Tianjia was so angry that his belly almost exploded. After this day, the harvest was close to zero. Moreover, he had used up a lot of his own strength. Absorbing the elemental spirits of the dead on a large scale also consumed his vitality. Moreover, it was such a large area. How could the amount of vitality used be small? Not only did he not recover, but he also used up a lot of his vitality. The losses outweighed the gains. In the commander's tent, Mu Tsung Lan was on full alert in case something unexpected happened. He knew that since he had made a targeted response, the other side would definitely make a move as well. Perhaps something unexpected would happen in the next moment. Therefore, he and a few other experts with high enough cultivation had long been fully prepared, ready to attack at any time. Suddenly, Mu Tsung Lan's eyes flashed, and he shot into the sky without any warning. High in the sky, a streak of black light was approaching at an astonishing speed. Mu Tsung Lan's rainbow was also approaching the battlefield in the sky at almost the same time. Amidst the howling winds, he fearlessly charged towards the streak of black light. You finally couldn't resist coming out? Heavenly demon evildoer, die! Mu Tsung Lan roared and attacked. He didn't even give the other party a chance to reply. And his first move was a killing move. Clearly, he was full of killing intent. The streak of black light coming from the opposite side was Yilyu. His goal was very simple and pure, which was to disrupt the battle. He didn't expect to encounter Mu Tsung Lan's powerful attack so quickly. Mu Tsung Lan laughed strangely and met the attack head-on without showing any signs of weakness. The two of them rolled and rolled in the air, their astonishing attacks colliding with each other. The power of their attacks intimidated everyone present. This was already a clash between the top super experts. The impact was naturally different from the others. However, in such an intense battle, 7 or 8 people from Yilua's side rushed out at high speed. On Mu Tsunglan's side, except for Xiadanqiong, the other experts rushed forward like crazy. The battle below was fierce, and so was the battle in the sky. And in the so-called high in the sky, there was a group of super experts at the peak level fighting in an even more explosive manner. This battle was truly so intense that the sky changed color, and the sun and moon dimmed. Everyone was a top expert, and rarely got injured. However, in this battle, there would be at least one person falling from the sky like a dumpling every once in a while. The more powerful the expert, the more they could balance themselves. Naturally, it was less easy for them to fall. This was almost an instinctive defense mechanism of a top expert. However, once they fell from the sky like a meteor without any room to struggle, it proved that this person had suffered a fatal injury. And falling like this was tantamount to certain death. There was no room for luck. But no matter what, Yuan Tianjia's plan to absorb the power of the soul to heal his injuries like before had completely become empty talk. The experts from both sides continued to fight with their lives on the line. At the beginning, everyone was still paying attention to stopping the wind or controlling its flow. Later on, when they were fighting excitedly, they no longer cared about these things. Suddenly, a gust of wind blew from left to right, followed by a tornado from top to bottom, then from north to south, from south to east, from east to west. The entire sky above the battlefield was filled with the howling of the hurricane. The soul power of the people who died below was almost instantly blown away without a trace, completely dissipating into thin air. Suddenly, Mu Tsunglan let out a loud roar. He raised his head to the sky and howled. His body rose into the air and his 2 hands suddenly danced at a crazy speed, transforming into a tornado that stabbed into the ground. The point of impact was a large mountain to the left behind. Mu Tsunglan rushed down like a bolt of lightning and grabbed the mountain with one hand. The entire mountain began to tremble without any warning. Then, with a loud boom, the mountain range that stretched for 150 kilometers collapsed. Mu Tsunglan roared as he soared into the sky. In his hand was a large sword that was about 100 zhang long and several tens of zhang wide. Or, it should be said that it was a large iron rod. With a single grab, he was able to extract all the metallic substances contained within the entire mountain and fuse them into a ball. With one grab, all the metal automatically gathered to form a large sword. The power of this large sword was unknown for the time being, but this large sword was at least hundreds of thousands of kilograms. This large sword that weighed hundreds of thousands of kilograms flashed with a dazzling light. Mu Tsunglan grabbed the large sword hilt with both hands and charged into the sky like a meteor, smashing it down towards Yilua's head. Yes, smashing down with the rod. Yilua let out a strange cry and retreated in a flash. Mu Tsunglan, you are also a famous person. How the fuck do you fight like this? When experts exchanged blows, they had their own rules. When one's strength reached their level, they would mostly use their own special martial skills and techniques to create an opportunity for victory. But to fight like Mu Tsunglan, who relied purely on his own brute strength to activate a giant weapon, was not something a martial artist could do. Of course, fighting in this way was unparalleled and could give one an absolute advantage in a short period of time. But there was a limit to one's strength. No matter how strong an expert was, they could not wield such a large weapon for long unless they could quickly defeat their opponent. But at the level of Mu Tsunglan and Yilua, if one side deliberately dodged while the other wielded such a large weapon, it was impossible to survive. Unparalleled power also meant that it was large and unstoppable. In a battle between super experts, one of the most important factors was endurance. If you were to wield such a heavy weapon, you would definitely not be able to sustain it for long. As long as the battle dragged on, your yuan qi would inevitably be greatly exhausted. In such an atmosphere of a battle between experts, every bit of yuan qi was precious. Recklessly exhausting one's yuan qi would not yield any results. It was truly an act of seeking death. But at this moment, such an inappropriate attack might not be ineffective. Mu Tsung Lan slammed his staff down again and said angrily, "I'll smash you to death, you demon!" Iluowe did not dare to take it head on. Using her movement technique, she leaped into the air again and safely dodged. If Mu Tsung Lan still persisted in pursuing Iluowe with this large sword, it was almost foreseeable that the outcome of the battle would be decided in a very short period of time. The loser would definitely be Mu Tsung Lan. But in the next moment, Mu Tsung Lan made a shocking move. Iluowe leaped into the air and dodged Mu Tsung Lan's heavy sword attack. Although she retreated unscathed, there was an opening behind her. Mu Tsung Lan grabbed the large iron staff and charged into the battlefield. With one move, he swept away thousands of troops. In an instant, the experts on Yuan Tianji's side were all forced to flee in all directions. It was as if a storm of the end of the world had appeared in the sky. The original spirits born from the deaths on the battlefield were all swept away, leaving not a single one behind. For a moment, Mu Tsung Lan was truly majestic and unstoppable. And at this moment, a large colorful bird suddenly flew over from the distant sky. Everyone was focused on the battle, so no one noticed the arrival of this large bird. That large bird flew thousands of feet away and stopped. With a shake of its body, it transformed into a thin man. At this moment, he was staring dumbfounded at Mu Tsung Lan's ferocious appearance, as he chased after the enemy with a large staff. His entire body twitched as he muttered, "Fuck! This is too fucking ferocious. Even more ferocious than Dong Wushang." The battle on the upper and lower battlefields continued. It continued until night time. Then, both sides withdrew their troops and returned to their camps. Groups of people came out and carried their own corpses back, minding their own business. Yuan Tianji flew into a rage. "I called you out for the purpose of chasing those people away. Not for you to fight. All of you are so fucking excited. Is it fun?" The experts who went out to fight all had tears in their eyes as they cursed in their hearts. "Your Majesty, what the fuck are you saying? If we don't fight, how can we chase them away? And we're fighting in high spirits. So many of our people died. Who fucking said it was fun? Was it that fun? This is fucking playing with our lives, alright?" Chapter 2308. Danqiong had never been so impatient since he started leading the army. And the army? Xie Danqiong had always set an example. What was wrong with him today? The messenger was startled, but he didn't dare to ask. Instead, he used his qinggong and rushed to the kitchen. The chefs were almost scared to death by his sudden appearance. Not long after, the first dish was served. The two of them had already drunk 2 jars of wine each. "Tell me, what do you want to do by coming here for no reason?" Xie Danqiong squinted. At this moment, the steady and confident image of a noble had completely disappeared. He sat crookedly on the ground with his collar open. Rui Budong drank with dark eyes and said, "Why would I come here for no reason? I heard that your place is very fun recently, so I came to play with you." Xie Danqiong was touched. He knew that Rui Budong saw that he was in danger and hurried over to help. He was touched, but he said, "You bastard, you only know how to play. Is this fun?" Rui Budong smiled and tore off a chicken leg, putting it in his mouth and chewing. Xie Danqiong thought of something and suddenly laughed. "Thief, you're nibbling on chicken feet. Aren't you nibbling on your own claws?" Rui Budong was furious. "Don't call me thief!" After a pause, he shouted, "You're talking nonsense, fart, fart! You're a phoenix, not a chicken!" Xie Danqiong smiled. "But you're on the ground now. As the saying goes, a phoenix on the ground is not as good as a chicken. Hey, that means you're not as good as it. How can you compare to it?" He pointed at the chicken head that had been torn into pieces. Rui Budong screamed, his hair standing on end. "Xie Danqiong, do you want to fight? How am I not as good as a chicken?" Xie Danqiong laughed. "Haven't you had enough of being beaten? Let's fight. Come on." Rui Batong then remembered that he was no match for him. He said dejectedly, I knew you were up to no good. You want to fight? But I won't let you do it. I won't let you feel good. What can you do? Xia Danqiong laughed. He felt that ever since he came to the Heaven Imperial Court, there had never been a day as happy as today. Rui Batong cursed a few times in a low voice, but he also laughed. He was swaying left and right. But what they didn't know was that their conversation was coincidentally overheard by the messenger who came to deliver food. The messenger was shocked when he heard this. Oh my God, so the two of them have this kind of relationship. I really didn't expect. On the second day, Yulai sent people to challenge Mu Tsunglan as usual. Mu Tsunglan's side could only respond passively. However, the battle in the sky continued. Just as the two sides were in full swing, suddenly, Xia Danqiong let out a phoenix cry that soared to the sky. The sound of the phoenix cry reverberated in all directions. While both sides were dumbfounded, a colorful phoenix suddenly appeared in the sky above the battlefield. As it spread its wings, the sky was filled with raging flames, as if it could burn the heavens and earth. When this phoenix spread its wings, its entire body was over 1,000 feet wide. Just one of its eyeballs was larger than a person's body. Even though it was daytime, those two big eyes were like two huge light bulbs. It soared majestically through the sky. Everyone on both sides of the battle was stunned. Although the people of the Heaven Imperial Court were all knowledgeable, especially the experts, who had actually seen a phoenix? Phoenixes existed in ancient myths and legends, and seemed to have disappeared from the Heaven Imperial Court for at least millions of years. The phoenix was extremely majestic, flying slowly through the sky. After circling once, it actually stopped in the middle of the battlefield. It opened its big eyes and looked down majestically. Why is there a battle here? Our phoenix race has always adhered to the concept of peace. We save the world and protect the Heaven Imperial Court. You mortals actually dare to wantonly destroy the peace of the Heaven Imperial Court. What is the reason for this? Below, Xia Danqiong almost spat out a mouthful of blood. What the hell? What kind of show is this? We agreed before that you just have to put on a show to intimidate the enemy. Who asked you to put on a show? And he's acting so big, so big. He's acting like a fool now. Eh? However, the show had already reached this point. He couldn't possibly take the initiative to destroy it, right? He could only brace himself and continue acting according to the script. Xia Danqiong pinched his nose and shouted, Lord Phoenix, please allow me to report. It's not that we want to disturb the Heaven Imperial Court, but the enemy's leader is the reincarnation of the extraterrestrial demon who wants to destroy the Heaven Imperial Court. Our original intention of starting this war was to slaughter the demon and pacify the Heaven Imperial Court. We really have no choice. The phoenix in midair turned its head and said, Oh? Extraterrestrial demon? Then, its wings spilled out flames. It stretched its neck and sniffed a few times. Then, it said calmly, What you said makes some sense. I was wondering why there was such a strong demonic aura here. It turns out that the extraterrestrial demon is causing trouble here. No wonder, no wonder. Then, suddenly, a clear phoenix cry rose into the sky. It shouted, Extraterrestrial demon clown, why don't you hand over your life to me? Don't you dare disturb the Heaven Imperial Court again. It flapped its wings and flew in the direction of Yuan Tianjie's camp. Xia Danqiong was stunned in his own camp. Then, he beat his chest and stamped his feet. He was really in so much pain that he wanted to die. Big brother, the script didn't say this, okay? This show can't be played like this. This is too melodramatic. Who told you to slaughter the demon directly? Do you really think that you are invincible as a phoenix? Aren't you fucking harming people? You want to kill me. Xia Danqiong's heart was filled with tears, but he still had to put on a longing expression. That big phoenix cried out and rushed into the camp in an instant with flames that could burn the world. With a roar, thousands of camps were set on fire at the same time. Raging flames soared into the sky. This was not an ordinary fire. It was the nirvana fire that Rui Butong had deliberately scattered. This kind of fire was said to burn everything. It would burn if it touched it, it would burn if it touched it. Sigh, it could even burn you to death. The fire instantly soared into the sky. The little remaining soul power in the air was instantly burned up by this fire. At this time, Yuan Tianjie's primordial spirit had turned into a layer of faint black smoke, quietly hiding in the sky to secretly absorb the soul power. With such a sudden change, he was almost engulfed in the raging nirvana fire. He hurriedly turned into smoke and escaped, returning to his body. His face was already purple with anger. Although he was lucky to escape unscathed, some of his vitality was still damaged by the fire. The efforts of these days were all in vain. In these 2 days, although Mu Tsanglan and the others had caused trouble, there were still some remnants of his primordial spirit that survived. It was not to the extent that he couldn't absorb any. Moreover, those that survived were all relatively strong primordial spirits. Using such primordial spirits to heal injuries would be more effective. But this inexplicable phoenix came out of nowhere and burned them all to ashes, leaving not a single drop behind. It even directly consumed the power of Yuan Tianjie's primordial spirit. How could Yuan Tianjie not go crazy with anger? Where the hell did this evil creature come from? It's really inexplicable. Yuan Tianjie no longer cared about the demeanor of a celestial emperor. He stomped his feet and cursed. Seeing that the phoenix was still wreaking havoc in the sky with raging flames, Yulai hurriedly ordered an attack. But that phoenix flew so high that normal attacks had no effect at all. Yulai had no choice but to order the experts to cross the sky and attack. Then, one by one, figures flew into the sky like meteors and attacked the 1,000-feet-tall phoenix. Evil creature! Stop pretending to be mysterious! I did this for you to slay the demon! You don't know what's good for you and actually attacked me? Where is justice? Rui Badong said angrily. How far are you going to be deceived by the heavenly demon? Do you really not have brains? Or is there mold in your brains? Can't you see that the heavenly demon instigated you to fight in order to cause more damage and to absorb soul power to strengthen yourself? Evil creature, stop talking nonsense! Iluowa rushed up like lightning. This phoenix's eyes were really sharp. It could even see this. They definitely couldn't let it continue. Of course, if the same words came from Mu Tsanglan's mouth, the effect would be completely different. He could even bite back, saying that Mu Tsanglan was slandering and distorting the truth. But coming from the mouth of this majestic and awe-inspiring phoenix, it was too effective. Golden dragons and phoenixes were super-existences worshipped as divine beasts in this world. Although with Iluowa and the others' tyrannical cultivation, they didn't care about divine beasts or not. But one had to know that in this world, people at the bottom were still the most numerous. Didn't they use the lowest level of public opinion to attack Mu Tsanglan before? If the other party also used the same method and did the opposite, Iluowa didn't dare to let this phoenix continue. She immediately attacked fiercely. Every move was a killer move with the intent to kill. Instantly, Rui Badong was battered and exhausted. His original intention of coming here was just to show off and help Xia Danqiu. Even if it was a one-on-one fight, his strength was still not a match for Iluowa. In fact, the difference was huge. Not to mention that the other party had a lot of experts helping her. In just a few exchanges, this phoenix that was still incomparably majestic a moment ago seemed to have changed beyond recognition. After a while, feathers flew everywhere, and a shrill cry sounded. Everyone's jaws dropped to the ground. This phoenix's appearance was so flashy that they really thought it was an invincible divine beast. Who would have thought that with just a few moves, it would be beaten into this state? Even if the people besieging you were all top experts of Tianke, even if the number of people was a little high, you should at least show some semblance of a divine beast, okay? Okay? Rui Badong was finally anxious. His eyes turned, and he roared. You've bullied me too much. This is my first time in the world, and I don't want to kill easily. But this group of ignorant people is targeting me like this. I'm going to use my killer move. Burn heaven and earth, And Tian K. Chapter 2309. The demonic phoenix was going to use its killer move? Everyone was stunned when they heard this. They subconsciously wanted to take a defensive stance to deal with the upcoming killing move. Naturally, their attacks slowed down involuntarily. The demonic phoenix was going to use its killer move. This was extraordinary. A phoenix that had not appeared for millions of years. Just the thought of it was terrifying enough. Would they be able to withstand it? They had no confidence. They should prepare to defend with all their might. If they died here, then it would be too unjust. As they thought about it, the phoenix let out a long cry. Its entire body suddenly emitted white flames. Whoosh! Iluwa was the first to retreat more than 100 meters. Her expression remained unchanged, but her heart was pounding. Humans might not be important, but as a heavenly demon, he still had many misgivings about the legendary Phoenix clan's Nirvana flame. Otherwise, he would not have come up with so many plans to kill all the Divine Beast clan. In the raging flames, the Phoenix let out a long cry. Ancestors! Today, I'm going to start a massacre. Its voice was full of melancholy. However, the feeling of being pretentious was even more intense. Everyone's heart beat even more inexplicably with fear. They all increased their vigilance once again, trying their best to increase their defensive power from the previous 100% to the limit of 120%. They also displayed all their secret defensive techniques, intending to resist the upcoming world-destroying attack. Then they saw a red light flash. The timid ones couldn't help but let out a scream or a cry of surprise. Everyone rubbed their eyes at the same time. What was going on? Was this the prelude to the world-ending attack? He saw that the phoenix had actually made a feint, and those two huge wings were gathered on its back. Like an arrow, it shot out at an extremely fast speed. With its butt facing backwards, it looked like it was about to disappear from his sight. This guy was bragging so much, scaring everyone into a daze. Then, he actually ran away. And it ran so fast. While everyone was dumbfounded, he had already disappeared without a trace like a wisp of smoke. What the fuck was going on? Everyone, including the heavens and the earth, all stared at it with their eyes wide open. Millions of people had the same feeling. Then, everyone only thought of one word: fuck. Fuck! Millions of people blurted out. This holy shit was truly world-shaking. Since ancient times, no one had ever been able to say these two words in such a majestic and mighty manner. Moreover, it was able to shake mountains and uproot high peaks, causing sand and stones to fly. It was probably the first time that someone had ever said these two words in such a majestic manner. But this time, it was unprecedented. There was still such a divine beast existing between heaven and earth. Those experts who had circulated their yuan qi and used all sorts of methods to defend themselves were all dumbfounded. They didn't know how to react. Two of them who had forcefully raised their yuan qi to the limit and used secret methods to save their lives, spat out a large mouthful of blood because of the sudden change in front of them. The lethality of this attack seemed to be really great. On the ground, Xia Danqiong, who knew the inside story, covered his face in extreme pain. This is so embarrassing. This is so fucking embarrassing. Brother, I wanted you to intimidate others, not to embarrass yourself. Now, this was just great. Xia Danqiong immediately raised his head with a straight face. There wasn't the slightest trace of panic. That's right. As long as I don't expose that Rui Butong is that phoenix, then everything will be fine. While others don't know, I must keep this matter strictly confidential. That phoenix and I, cough cough. I don't know him at all. Who is that phoenix? I don't know him. I don't know. That's right. We don't have any relationship at all. Xia Danqiong solemnly looked around and said, cough cough, everyone heard it just now. Even Lord Phoenix said that Yuan Tianji is a demonic demon. He started the war to collect the Yuan spirits of our race's experts and strengthen himself. That's it. Everyone nodded like chickens pecking rice. Why do I feel that Xie Danqiong's words are lacking in confidence? Shouldn't he be full of confidence? Misconception. It must be a misconception. That Lord Phoenix just now should be a little phoenix that has just stepped into the world. His strength is naturally lacking. And slightly lacking. Thinking about it, Xie Danqiong still felt that something was wrong. He swallowed his saliva and added such an explanation. Yes, Xie Danqiong, a guy said seriously. It's definitely a little phoenix that hasn't reached adulthood yet. He was besieged by so many people. Can't he just run if he can't win? Just now when he spread his wings and flew high, I paid special attention to the phoenix's lower body. I saw that. That's right, that's a male phoenix. A male phoenix. And it's indeed not fully developed yet. I really saw it. It's really not fully developed yet. The corner of Xie Danqiong's mouth finally couldn't help but twitch. Then it twitched again. Then his entire face twitched. He almost spat out a mouthful of old blood. He turned his head and glared fiercely at this officer. Fortunately, his eyes were fierce, so he didn't burst out laughing. This guy, what's wrong with you? Why do you have to pay attention to that part? And you can observe it in detail and comment on it. It's fine if you don't know about it. Why do you have to publicize it? Bastard, and that damned Ray Butong, he's a complete idiot. You said that you transformed into a phoenix and spread your wings. It's indeed very mighty. But who would have thought that when you were mighty and beautiful, your lower body would be exposed? I'm going crazy. Even if I'm not crazy, I'm going to vomit blood. Xie Danqiong returned to the big tent. He fiercely picked up the water sack and gulped down the water in it. Then he wiped his mouth. Then he unwillingly and ferociously blurted out some vulgar words. His handsome face was tangled to the extreme at this moment. The guard in front of the door looked down and stood there majestically. He didn't move, but his heart was filled with endless shock. Chief Xie didn't seem to have said a single vulgar word even when he was facing a desperate situation 2 days ago. He always had a graceful and elegant demeanor. But I don't know what happened these 2 days. He's very different from his usual self. Not only can he call himself I, even those words like fuck and fuck are easy to say. It's as if it's going to develop into a catchphrase. What's going on here? What's the special reason for Chief Xie to have such a huge change? Puzzling. Pondering. Deep in the night, Ray Butong returned to Xie Danqiong's independent tent in dejection. He was caught and beaten on the spot by Xie Danqiong. Ray Butong screamed miserably. He knew that he was in the wrong. He didn't even struggle, let alone fight back. He just took the beating silently. For a moment, the big tent was filled with sounds of violent beating. There was also a kind of extremely angry and tangled cursing that couldn't be suppressed. Stupid bird! Stupid bird! Stupid bird! You're a fucking stupid bird! I knew you were stupid before, but I didn't expect you to be stupid to this extent. Why did I think of asking you to take action? I'm simply blind. Following you, stupid bird, I'm going to become stupid because of you. Tell me, do you think you're still useful? The eyebrows of the guards standing outside twitched. They kept quiet out of fear. Listening to this voice, feeling that power. Damn it! Without exception, all the guards broke out in cold sweat. If this kind of power hit me, I'm afraid I would have been turned into minced meat. The one inside doesn't look tall, and his figure is thin, but he can actually take it so well. Damn it, that guy can really take a beating. The next day, the battle continued. The two brothers, Ray Butong and Xie Danqiong, personally came to the scene to supervise the battle. Ray Butong was dressed in black. His face was cold and solemn. He didn't say a word, just like a real peak expert. He stood with his hands behind his back, watching coldly from the sidelines. He was really awe-inspiring, showing off the demeanor of an expert. No one would have thought that this seemingly high and mighty super-expert was actually the mythical beast Phoenix that was crazily fleeing with its butt facing the sky and its lower body naked yesterday. Just as the battle was getting intense, suddenly, a huge flying boat appeared in the sky. It flew straight towards this side. The people on both sides who didn't participate in the battle were all surprised. Which force is this? Are they helping us, or are they helping the other side? The flying boat was getting closer and closer. The destination gradually became clear. It was slowly flying towards the center of Yuan Tianjia's camp. It was already about to land. An officer under Yu Qi's command couldn't help but be pleasantly surprised. Could it be that our reinforcements have arrived? Someone stepped forward and asked. Who are you? Please state your identity quickly. Otherwise, you will be destroyed. On the flying boat, a steady voice said. We are the reinforcements from the rear. We are here to support His Majesty the Sky Emperor in eliminating the rebels. Take out the relevant token. The token! Someone shouted. He was obviously a meticulous person. If you say you are reinforcements, then you are reinforcements. What if the enemy is pretending to be you? The person on the flying boat said indifferently. We naturally have proof of our identity, but it is inconvenient to present it now. We will present it immediately after we land. Seeing that the flying boat had already arrived above the camp and was preparing to land, everyone heaved a sigh of relief. The other party was obviously planning to land in the center of the camp. If it was the enemy, wouldn't they be surrounded on the spot and destroyed instantly? There didn't seem to be such a stupid enemy. Since it wasn't the enemy, then it should be one of them. Even Yuan Tianjia in the tent was a little suspicious. He had several question marks in his heart. Where did these reinforcements come from? On the battlefield, Ilue frowned and thought, could it be that the order was given to those super sects back then, and now they are here to help? Since Yuan Tianjia, Ilue, and Yu Qi didn't stop them, the relevant generals immediately ordered the troops in the center to retreat to make enough space for the flying boat to land. Just as they were busy preparing, the flying boat suddenly accelerated its speed of descent. Chapter 23:10. Everyone below exclaimed. What's going on? Fuck! What's wrong with you? Motherfucker! Quickly adjust the speed of descent. Ah, fuck! Everyone run! The flying boat descended with the force of a thunderbolt. To be more precise, it smashed down. At the same time, 10 round holes suddenly appeared on the flying boat. Then, something that couldn't be seen clearly popped out from inside the boat. It flew in the sky with a whooshing sound, and its landing point was uncertain. Everyone below could see that it was a very strange chair after it flew for some distance. The front part was pointed, and the back part was forked. It was grotesquely shaped. There was a person sitting on each chair, and they were rushing forward like meteors as the chairs shot out. They had already covered a distance of 3,000 feet in the blink of an eye. They were rushing towards Xia Danqiong's camp like moths to a flame. What's going on? What's going on? Everyone's mind went blank. Isn't this situation too strange? It doesn't make any sense. Then, the momentum of the chairs gradually weakened. The 10 people on them suddenly stood up at the same time. They kicked the chairs with their feet. Apparently, they were using all their strength to continue flying towards Xia Danqiong's camp. These people had already covered a distance of 2,000 feet. So, they weren't far from the battlefield. These 10 people were obviously first-class experts. So, they had crossed the entire battlefield in the blink of an eye, and had landed in Xia Danqiong's camp without anyone noticing. They had descended from the sky. The person in the lead was dressed in snow-white clothes. His face was gentle and elegant. He was tall and handsome. He looked very confident and at ease. Especially that kind of steady and heroic bearing, it was as if the entire world was already in his grasp. He was extremely confident, and it really made people admire him. Xia Danqiong was shocked to see this unforeseen event. He was so shocked that he didn't know what to say. He stood there, and his whole body trembled. Hot tears almost gushed out of his eyes. That white-clothed man slowly walked out of the smoke and dust as he looked at the excited Xia Danqiong. He smiled gently. Xia Danqiong, I'm here. Xia Danqiong's voice was trembling. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. Mo Tianji! Is it really you? A look of excitement also flashed across Mo Tianji's face. But he forcibly suppressed this excitement. Then, he smiled and said, Brother, you're fighting tirelessly. So how can I, Mo Tianji, not help you? Hee hee. Since it's my first time here, I don't have any good gifts to give you. I might as well give you a fireworks show. Enjoy it! As he spoke, he clapped his hands lightly. 50,000 zhang away, the airboat that was descending in the center of Yuan Tianjia's camp suddenly accelerated again. Boom! Without any hesitation, he smashed it onto the ground. The weight of this flying boat was more than 1,000,000 jin. Not to mention the fact that Mo Tianji had put other things in it. Smashing down like this, the sound it caused was enough to shake the mountains and the earth, causing the sky to collapse and the earth to crack. The soldiers of Yuan Tianjia's camp near the place where the airboat fell were all shaken by this unusually powerful shock wave. They were sent flying in all directions. Some of the people who were close to the airboat bled from their 7 apertures on the spot. Many of the people with weaker cultivations were directly shaken to death on the spot. Even Xie Danqiong had clearly felt a strong tremor under his feet. Moreover, this sudden change had caught him off guard. Many large stones that weighed hundreds of jin in the vicinity also jumped up. It could be seen that the shock this time was very violent. However, Xie Danqiong was somewhat puzzled. Could it be that Mo Tianji had racked his brains to do this just to smash a few people to death? That would be a huge waste of an expensive airboat. Such a waste wouldn't be very effective. Looking at Xie Danqiong's doubtful eyes, Mo Tianji smiled faintly. He raised his eyebrows. Then, he slowly used 2 fingers to cover his ears. Then, he softly laughed and said, The fireworks show is about to begin. Boom! Xie Danqiong's complexion changed. He roared, Everyone, cover your ears. Get on the ground! Xie Danqiong's voice hadn't faded away. The soldiers didn't seem to have reacted. Then, they heard a truly earth-shattering sound. Boom! That airboat suddenly emitted a blazing white light. Then, it exploded. At this moment, the world also lost its color because of this explosion. The world changed color. The sky was filled with human bodies and countless severed limbs. Many of them were turned into ashes and shattered into pieces halfway through their flight. An unprecedentedly huge mushroom cloud rose into the sky. It rose in spirals and rolled up. It became bigger and bigger. Eventually, it engulfed the entire horizon. Xie Danqiong's cultivation was exquisite. But he still felt a burst of violent tremors even though they were so far apart. His heart was beating rapidly, and his feet were off the ground. Then, he couldn't hear anything. Finally, he sat down on the ground without any dignity. The 2 main camps of the 2 armies, 10% of the tents had collapsed from the force of the tremors. Nearby, more than 30 mountains collapsed at the same time. Rubble pierced through the clouds. Countless crushed stones flew into the sky. Yuan Tianjia's camp, which stretched for thousands of miles, became devastated after this explosion. It was too horrible to look at. 1/3 of the enemy's camp was directly destroyed by this explosion. A total of 2 million people were blown to smithereens by this massive explosion. Those who were lucky enough to survive didn't exceed half of the total. And these were those who were further away. Such a huge explosion happened without any warning in a densely populated military camp. It would be strange if they were fine. After a while, the aftermath of the explosion gradually subsided. But this moment was so miserable that even Xie Danqiong couldn't bear to watch anymore. This explosion was really too ruthless. Iluowe, who was in midair, was relatively close to the explosion. At this moment, she had already been sent flying to God knows where by the aftermath of the explosion. As for Heavenly Emperor Mo Yun, Yuan Tianjia, he was at the center of the explosion. Even with his profound strength, he really didn't know what would happen to him. Mu Xinglan was also lying on the ground because of this unprecedented explosion. His intuition was like thunder in his ears. He was also considered unlucky. He was at the forefront of the battle. He was at the front, and was directly affected by the aftermath of the explosion. Caught off guard, he fell from the sky like hailstones and almost paralyzed half of his body. Fortunately, his strength was profound and he didn't really paralyze half of his body. However, it was inevitable that he would temporarily lose his hearing. Gritting his teeth and crawling up, he saw that everyone around him was shouting something with their mouths wide open. But his ears were buzzing and he couldn't hear anything. He couldn't help but shout, "What's going on? Who can tell me what's going on? What's going on?" But when he said it, he realized that even the words he said seemed to be. He actually couldn't hear a single word. Within thousands of miles, everyone was covering their ears and cursing loudly. However, everyone only felt that the world was silent, and they couldn't hear anything. There was only some buzzing noise in their ears. Xie Danqiong's situation was better. He had already barely recovered. He crawled up from the ground and asked with a twisted face, "I say, what's going on?" Emo Tianji's white robe fluttered and he smiled gently. "It's not a big deal. All flying boats have a self-destruct function. It's just that I slightly improved it." "How did you slightly improve it? Did you really just slightly improve it?" Xie Danqiong gritted his teeth. "Actually, it can't even be considered as improving it. I just added 7 million kilograms of explosives. That's all. Yes, I also added some poison and poisonous smoke. It's not a big deal." Emo Tianji said casually. "This is my first gift to you. This fireworks show is pretty good, right? 7 million kilograms of explosives. Fireworks show?" Xie Danqiong opened his mouth wide. He felt as if his heart had been crushed by these words. Xie Danqiong suddenly felt powerless as he looked at Emo Tianji's casual and careless manner. What is a ruthless person? What is a poisonous person? Have you seen it? If anyone dares to say that I'm ruthless, I'll risk my life with them. You can't compare people with people. Compared to Emo Tianji, I'm just a pure and kind-hearted young man. The experts around Xie Danqiong had recovered their sense of hearing. So, they naturally heard Emo Tianji's words. Their mouths were wide open as they foolishly looked at this elegant and handsome young man in front of them. They felt as if millions of alpacas were galloping in their hearts, and were trampling them back and forth. Fuck, the generals didn't have any other thoughts apart from these 3 words. They didn't have any other thoughts. What kind of monster was this young man who looked so handsome and elegant, who exuded gentleness and sincerity from head to toe? The aftermath of the explosion gradually disappeared. The world was still shaking, but it was no longer enough to cause any harm to the experts. Emo Tianji smiled. "What's wrong, Xie Danqiong? I've given you such a big gift. Aren't you going to invite me in?" Xie Danqiong woke up from his stupefied state like a dumb goose. He repeatedly said, "Oh, oh, oh." Then, he came back to his senses. He opened his eyes wide and cursed loudly. "Motherfucker! Emo Tianji, you should have told me in advance that you were going to do this, right? Now, where the fuck do you want me to invite you in?" Xie Danqiong's commander's tent wasn't lucky enough to survive the explosion. It had already turned into ruins. Emo Tianji chuckled. He had an apologetic look on his face as he said, "I didn't think of this. I'm sorry. Please forgive me." Chapter 23:11. Looking at Emo Tianji, it was clear that he was completely complacent and high-spirited. Xie Danqiong became even angrier when he saw this. With Emo Tianji's intelligence, how could he not have thought of this? However, he still chose to do this. Presumably, his caution had come into play. He was afraid that Xie Danqiong would leak the information. Moreover, you've only lost a few tenths at best. You haven't suffered any casualties. Emo Tianji's robe fluttered in the wind. He confidently walked forward, and casually said, "You've maintained your fighting strength quite well, ah." Black lines appeared on Xie Danqiong's face. "You made such an explosion. Aren't you afraid of offending the heavens?" Emo Tianji smiled gently and elegantly. "So, I'm already prepared to do good deeds. Xie Danqiong was speechless. He turned his head and turned his face to one side. The most optimistic and conservative estimate of your explosion just now is that it would kill at least a few million people. How many good deeds do you have to do to make up for it? It's a waste of saliva to talk to this guy. Especially when I see his harmless face. It makes me want to ruthlessly kick his handsome face. However, I don't have the time to do that now. So, I hurriedly ordered them to set up camp. At this time, the landslide on the surrounding mountains was still ongoing. It was still rumbling and shaking the mountains and the earth. All the soldiers under Xie Danqiong's command looked at Mo Tianji with reverence as they set up camp. Everyone had the same thought in their hearts: don't offend this person. We won't be far from destruction if we offend him. I don't know how Chief Xie dares to talk to that person so presumptuously. Isn't he afraid? Sure enough, an expert's way of doing things is unfathomable. Motherfucker, everyone says that the extraterrestrial demons are so. Now, it seems that the extraterrestrial demons aren't even qualified to carry the shoes of this gentle and harmless duke. This person is too ruthless. He just came here, and millions of lives have become a rainbow to welcome him. It's better to have less contact with such a ruthless person. It's best to stay away from him. Fortunately, he's Chief Xie's brother. Who would dare to provoke such a person? At this moment, an angry voice mixed with infinite grievance and grief roared. Fuck you! Mo Tianji! You bastard son of a bitch! You bastard! You still dare to come! See if I don't beat you to death, you bastard! Just you wait! It was Rui Butong who was cursing without a care in the world. Among the brothers, Rui Butong was undoubtedly the most miserable one who was plotted against and hunted down. At best, the other brothers would die, but there would always be a way out. Only Rui Butong was completely dead. No matter how he walked, there would always be a dead end in front of him. Because of Mo Tianji's accurate information, Rui Butong had already been beaten into meat paste countless times. It would be strange if her eyes didn't turn red when she saw Mo Tianji at this moment. When enemies meet, their eyes turn red. Naturally, they clenched their fists and rushed forward without a care. When the surrounding soldiers saw this, it was an eye-opener. Oh my God, there really was someone who wasn't afraid of death. He actually dared to clamor in front of everyone. Wasn't this a little too daring? It seems like he's an acquaintance. Mo Tianji was smiling and talking to Xie Danqiong. But he suddenly heard this loud curse. So, he raised his eyebrows and said, "Oh, so there's a stupid bird here. Guards, take this person down and beat him to death. It doesn't matter if he's beaten to death. Count it all on me." Hearing this, the experts that Mo Tianji had brought with him rushed forward without a word, and used all their strength to besiege this bird. Mo Tianji and Xie Danqiong chatted and laughed as they talked about the world. On the other hand, Rui Butong had fallen into a perilous siege. It was really dangerous at every step. How could the people that Mo Tianji had brought to participate in the war be ordinary? Almost everyone had a high cultivation level that was not inferior to Rui Butong's. Moreover, they besieged one person. Soon, Rui Butong was pressed to the ground and beaten crazily. Of course, they wouldn't go so far as to beat him to death. However, they could still beat him half to death. This was exactly what they were doing. On the side, the generals were puzzled. Mo Tianji and Xie Danqiong were chatting and laughing. They actually didn't care about this matter at all. They just let Rui Butong be beaten into a meat patty. This was too cruel. Could it be that this guy wasn't their brother? This was too strange. Even if they weren't brothers, this was a little too much, right? Let's not talk about the new ruthless person. Our Chief Xie wasn't the kind of person who would take someone's life. What was going on? Rui Butong was pressed to the ground by several people. His mouth was almost pressed into the soil. He was still shouting loudly. Mo Tianji, you fucking wait. When the boss comes, I swear I won't be human if I don't beat you into a flying chicken. If I don't chop you into pieces and cook you, I won't be called Rui Butong. Fucking, you're still beating me? You. I'll remember you. I'll tell you. I'll remember you. Save me. The barracks were finally set up. Mu Tsang-lan had also rushed back from the front line. After such an explosion, both sides didn't have the mood to continue fighting. It seemed like both sides were temporarily not in the mood. Mu Tsang-lan looked at Mo Tianji as if he was looking at a monster. There was deep fear and apprehension in his eyes. This was a madman. Mu Tsang-lan thought to himself. Not long after, Ray Bouton was dragged in like a dead dog and thrown on a chair. The pitiful phoenix was beaten into a chicken this time. His originally skinny figure had actually become fatter, swollen. Hearing Mo Tianji talk about this, Xia Danqiong's eyes widened. In the end, his eyes almost popped out of their sockets. It wasn't just him. Even Mu Tsang-lan, a million-year-old senior, and the commander of the entire Mo Yutian army who had experienced countless big scenes, had the same reaction as Xia Danqiong. Even Ray Bouton, who was beaten until he was dizzy, didn't curse at this time. His entire person was in a daze. The faces of the people Mo Tianji brought were all green. Their faces were filled with lingering fear. It was obvious that they were overly frightened. You're saying that you brought along 7 million jin of explosives and stuffed them into your own flying boat, and flew a long distance of 170,000 li to come here? Xia Danqiong's complexion turned deathly pale as he said those words. He was on the verge of collapsing. The faces of the people Mo Tianji brought revealed a kind of "I've survived a disaster. I can't bear to look back." All the dangers along the way were enough to make one go crazy from fright. Mo Tianji nodded as if it was a matter of course. Yes, what's wrong? Isn't this a matter of course? Without my arrival, would there be such a beautiful fireworks show? I'm going crazy. I'm going crazy. Xia Danqiong grabbed his hair. He gritted his teeth as he looked at Mo Tianji. How come I didn't see it? Your you. At the side, Mu Tsang-lan's hair stood up as he listened. Carrying 7 million caddies of explosives, flying at high altitudes for a total of 170,000 li. Mu Tsang-lan didn't know about others, but he definitely wouldn't dare to ride such a flying boat. He wasn't fucking crazy. He was having a stroke, and it was a huge stroke. Even if they were very careful, as long as there was a slight collision between them, there would be no need to talk about exploding the heavens. Perhaps, Mo Tianji and the other 10 people would have already turned into incomparably brilliant fireworks in the sky before they could even reach this place. In such a place of explosion, even Ray Bouton with his phoenix physique would definitely be turned into ashes. There was no luck. Cough. Mo Tianji coughed and casually waved his fan. Before we came, I did a divination for myself. The divination showed that this trip was daunting but not dangerous. Do you know what this means? In fact, the conclusion was that nothing was wrong. Therefore, we came here without a hitch. Everyone's head was dripping with sweat. Fuck your sister. You did a divination for such a big matter. Who do you think you are? What about you guys? Did you guys just let him do it? He's crazy. Are you guys crazy too? Are you playing with your lives? Xia Danqiong's face darkened as he asked Mo Tianji. One of them smiled bitterly. How can we change Lord Tianji's decision? As for this trip, I really can't bear to look back on the past. My hair turned gray early. One of them had a face full of fear. It seemed like everyone's hair was hiding a few strands of gray hair. Wasn't that the case? Along the way, they just sat in the cracks between the explosives. Their bodies were like zombies. They didn't dare to move at all. A whole 7 days. A whole 7 days. They didn't even dare to blink. They were afraid that they would accidentally trigger the explosives and turn into beautiful fireworks. Experts of this level were so scared that they needed to pee. However, they didn't dare to go to the toilet. They held it in all the way. They didn't go crazy from holding it in. How could outsiders understand this feeling? Just having a few strands of gray hair was already a very, 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 very lucky thing. When they heard Xie Danqiong's question, all of them had a bitter look on their faces. Motherfucker! This is the most dangerous trip of my life. Compared to this trip in the sky, all the life and death battles in Jianghu in the past were disdainful. What desperate situation! What powerful enemies! They couldn't even be compared to this. Finally, after coming here, I saw the result of the bitter journey. I also ruthlessly flattened a meat target. The depression in my heart was vented a lot. I felt much more comfortable and refreshed. Chapter 23:12. All the generals in the tent nodded in agreement. Other than these two words, there really wasn't any other words that could accurately describe the actions of this gentle and elegant Duke Gui. Really fucking strange, there was actually such a complete outlaw in this world. A general stood up abruptly and hurriedly walked out. Where are you going? Mu Tsenglan was extremely displeased. Didn't you see that there was an esteemed guest here? How could you be so immature? You're really embarrassing me. That general turned around with a green face. General, please allow me to report, I'm going to the latrine. Although I was only listening just now, I also felt the urge to pee. It really scared me to death. I'm covered in sweat. Who would have thought that once these words came out, there would actually be many people who agreed? All the generals who usually boasted that they were extremely daring all stood up with bitter faces. I'm also going to the latrine, I also need to pee, this is really humiliating. Mu Tsenglan stood up angrily. I'll go to the latrine and catch all of them back. They haven't even gone yet, what are you going to catch? It was very obvious that General Mu was also scared to the point of peeing. However, he was experienced and had his own countermeasures. And those countermeasures were quite reasonable, not to mention Xie Danqiong's side. Let's turn around and talk about Yuan Tianjie's side. After the explosion, that kind of tragic scene was really too horrible to look at. Even the most cold-hearted person in the world would shed tears of sympathy if they saw this scene. The so-called end of the world was probably nothing more than this. It might not even be comparable to the desolation in front of them. The military camp that bore the brunt of the direct impact was swept clean, and an unusually vast lake was created. The lake water rippled and sparkled. However, there were countless strange things floating on the surface of the water. The entire lake was red, blood red. There was still a stretch of thousands of feet by the side of the lake that was filled with minced meat that couldn't be any smaller. As for the places further away, countless broken human heads were blown by the wind, spinning on the ground. There was complete silence. Under such a huge explosion, even their cries were forcefully suppressed. The surviving soldiers stared blankly at the scene in front of them. This barren land, this wasteland, this boundless lake. Is this the military camp that we were fighting and defending with our lives just a moment ago? All the remaining soldiers were in a daze, and they seemed like children that had lost their mothers. Their miserable state simply caused one to shed tears upon hearing it, and feel sad upon seeing it. In the distance, a human figure flew back with a whoosh. His entire body was shrouded in thick black smoke. He shouted loudly like thunder. Who did this? Who did it? Who the hell did it? I'm going to tear him to shreds. The person who came was actually Heavenly Emperor in Cloud, Yuan Tianjie. But at this moment, His Majesty the Heavenly Emperor did not have the slightest bit of his usual majesty and demeanor. His entire body was tattered, and his face was completely black. One of his shoulders had been blown off. Fortunately, it was already recovering quickly. But that sorry state was still obvious and could not be concealed. In that explosion just now, although Yuan Tianjie had an exceedingly high cultivation, he was still in the center position after all. He had to bear the most direct impact and was completely defenseless. If not for his fast reaction, he would have been completely annihilated in this explosion. If he was really killed by the explosion, Yuan Tianjie would probably really become a legend, an unparalleled legend. The first heavenly emperor to be killed by an explosion in the history of the world. And the first heavenly demon king to be killed by an explosion in the history of the world. That would truly be too sullen of a death. Facing Yuan Tianjie's question, no one was able to answer. The wind in the sky whistled, as if weeping and complaining. In the distance, the landslide was still ongoing, and the rumbling sounds were endless. Your Majesty. Yuqi appeared in Yuan Tianjie's field of vision, covered in wounds. The moment she appeared, she started bawling. Your Majesty, Woo. Too miserable. Our situation is really too miserable. This bunch of goddamn demons. Too miserable. Yuan Tianjie's eyes widened. He was already in a bad mood to begin with. Now that a wailing person suddenly popped out, his mood naturally became even worse. However, when he saw Yuqi's current pitiful state and how her entire body was practically shattered, he couldn't bring himself to scold her. He let out a long sigh and said, "Hurry up and organize the army." Yuqi replied while sobbing, then immediately turned around and left. In the distance, Prime Minister Iluoue also flew back in a sorry state. Before she could say anything, she started coughing. Every time she coughed, thick black smoke would come out of her mouth. With this explosion, the Prime Minister's situation was also extremely miserable. She was speechless facing Yuan Tianjie. They really did not expect that in such an intense battlefield, such a super ruthless person would appear out of thin air. He directly used the largest and most powerful flying ship in the Heaven Palace, piled with explosives, and flew over tens of thousands of miles, directly smashing it on the army's head. What kind of motherfucking bastard can come up with such an idea? Fuck your mother! Iluoue cursed. This is simply inhumane and deranged. To be able to make an extraterrestrial demon curse him with words like inhumane and deranged, Mo Tianji was really proud. Yuan Tianjie did not say a word. The murderous aura around his body was almost fully formed. He swore to himself that if he caught the culprit behind today's calamity, if he let him die a quick death, then he would have let down the 8 generations of heavenly devil ancestors. In Xie Danqiong's tent, everyone looked at Rui Butong in surprise. This guy who was almost beaten into a meat patty just now was definitely not an adjective. He was really like a meat patty. In just a moment, all the wounds on his body disappeared at a speed visible to the naked eye. Slowly, the bruises all over his body disappeared. His face also gradually returned to normal, and he became lively again. This guy's recovery speed was even faster than Mu Tsunlan, a peak saint expert. What kind of monster was this? It was like a phoenix going through nirvana, rising from the ashes. This was probably nothing more than this, right? Everyone looked at Xie Danqiong, then looked at Mo Tianji, then looked at Rui Butong. They all had the same feeling in their hearts. Chief Xie's brothers, all seemed to be monsters. Although their paths were all unusual, they were definitely monsters. There was no doubt about this. Done? Mo Tianji asked Rui Butong kindly. Rui Butong nodded desperately. Do you still want to take revenge on me? I can give you a chance. Mo Tianji asked gently, full of modesty. Chapter 23:13. He was really scared to death. Ever since he heard that Mo Tianji had traveled thousands of miles with millions of kilograms of explosives, Rui Butong only felt a cold wind blowing at the back of his head. He was so scared that his legs almost turned to jelly. As for the thought of dealing with Mo Tianji, it was like snow melting under the scorching sun. There was nothing left. That's a good boy. You know when to advance and when to retreat. Mo Tianji laughed loudly. He was in high spirits and full of confidence. This strategy of his was quite effective. Dealing with Yuan Tianji was one of the main reasons. On the other hand, it was also very effective. Of course, Gu Duxing and the others have also been hunted down by me. When they come, you can contact them, Mo Tianji suggested. I don't mind if they join forces to beat me up. I really don't mind. This is nothing to me. Rui Butong was just thinking about this idea. Hearing this, he couldn't help but widen his eyes. You said you. Mo Tianji smiled very warmly. When the time comes, I may join forces with them to deal with you. But I don't know, do you want to offend me? Or do you want to offend me? What do you think they will choose? Xia Danqiong laughed loudly. Faced with such a choice, the brothers probably wouldn't choose to help Rui Butong. That's because the most frightening person among our brothers is this master of calculation and manipulation, Mo Tianji, before us. In terms of terror, even Big Brother Chu Yang was inferior to Mo Tianji. Sitting in the commander's tent, Mo Tianji was carefully listening to Xia Danqiong's explanation of the current situation and his own situation. During this period of time, Xia Danqiong's side was in a bleak situation, whether it was in terms of overall strength or public opinion. Mu Tsunglan himself was almost cursed to the point of his ancestors. In fact, it wasn't just his ancestors. It was as if his ancestors were unlucky. If his ancestors knew, even if they knew that Mu Tsunglan was innocent, they would still visit him in his dreams to teach him a lesson. Faced with this matter, Xia Danqiong was at his wit's end. He couldn't deal with it. At this moment, Mo Tianji had arrived. With the arrival of this cunning ancestor, this difficult problem was naturally handed over to him to deal with. It's only been 10 days, how did we end up in such a terrible state? Mo Tianji frowned. He had been traveling at high speed on the way here. It was difficult for him not to receive news from the flying boat. His current news was still from 10 days ago. 10 days ago, Xia Danqiong's side had been singing a triumphant song. Tens of millions of soldiers had raised their banners to attack the devils. How majestic was the army's appearance! However, it had been destroyed in a short span of 10 days. In fact, less than 30% of the army's strength had been left at its peak. The most important thing was that the morale of the soldiers was seriously lacking. The general's fighting spirit wasn't at its peak either. However, they had been forcibly destroyed by external forces. So, this army might collapse at any time once that momentum dissipated. He had never thought that Xia Danqiong would end up in such a difficult situation. Moreover, it had happened in such a short period of time. On your side, you raised the flag to exterminate the demons. You exterminated the heavenly demons and evildoers who infiltrated the heavenly imperial court. You clearly stood on the moral high ground. Now you have been forced into such a miserable situation. It's really... Mo Tianji sighed deeply. It was difficult to conceal his disdain. Mu Tsunglan's old face also turned the color of pig liver. These words were too much of a slap to the face. Well, leave this matter to me. Mo Tianji thought for a while. Then, he immediately said. His tone was full of confidence. What do you want to do? Xia Danqiong's eyes lit up. Ha! Have you ever heard of the saying, when things reach an extreme, they will move in the opposite direction? Mo Tianji asked. After he finished speaking, he chuckled and went to rest. Mu Tsunglan looked at Mo Tianji's departing figure with a belly full of suspicion. Now that we have reached this point, the war might collapse at any time. What other methods does he have to turn the situation around? If there's one person in this world who can turn the situation around, then it must be him, Xia Danqiong said confidently. Don't worry. Mo Tianji can definitely do it. When it comes to playing mind games, even my big brother Chu Yang is not his opponent. He is a peerless sly person. Xia Danqiong didn't know whether to praise or criticize him. He had a look of relief on his face. Mu Tsunglan's eyes were full of suspicion. After Mo Tianji looked through all the information, he immediately took action. The first step is to stir up public opinion. Continue to scold Mu Tsunglan. Scold him as exaggeratedly and as viciously as possible. The more exaggerated and viciously scolded, the better. The Tianji Intelligence Department quickly spread this order. Mo Tianji's orders were the only way to go in the Tianji Intelligence Department. Any order would be carried out with 100% accuracy. There was absolutely no room for error. Therefore, in an instant, all the various departments of the Tianji Intelligence Department in Mou Tian received this news. After a while, a wave of condemnation towards Mu Tsanglan spread out in an unprecedentedly grand manner. Mu Tsanglan is a despicable and shameless person. He has no talent and no virtue. He has been in a high position for many years. Now, he is plotting a rebellion. He wants to be the emperor himself. Mu Tsanglan once occupied hundreds of thousands of beautiful ladies for his own selfish desires. He is a beast among beasts. Mu Tsanglan, in order to repair his ancestral grave, forcefully moved 8 million people. He occupied hundreds of thousands of acres of land. He caused countless families to become homeless, and their wives to be separated. That year, in order to occupy a lady, Mu Tsanglan forced the death of an entire family. His despicable actions are simply outrageous. In order to gain the favor of a handsome guy, Mu Tsanglan did not hesitate to kill hundreds of people just to make the handsome guy smile. Mu Tsanglan's 1,000 crimes are as follows. Mu Tsanglan originally only had the title of a rebel. Now, in just a day's time, he had transformed into an evil, unpardonable, insane, and inhumane supervillain. When the masses who did not know the truth saw so many truths, they were naturally filled with righteous indignation and scolded him. It turned out that the person who wanted to steal the throne had so many despicable actions. Then, his previous actions were reasonable. Everyone must have scolded him. It would be wrong not to scold him. How could a despicable person like Mu Tsanglan still have the face to live in this world? Anyway, in the hearts of the masses, he was already dead. A day later, Mu Tsanglan received the latest news. He almost spat out a mouthful of blood. He immediately went to find Xie Danqiong. This is how he cleared my name. I really. After saying I really 7 or 8 times, his face turned red. Finally, he scolded. Fuck. Xie Danqiong grimaced and held his forehead. This is a strategy. Let's wait and see. Mu Tsanglan left the tent in anger. In the next few days, as he fought, he heard the curses outside escalate. Mu Tsanglan wantonly killed his own people. Every year, tens of millions of Tian-K people die in his hands. In fact, Mu Tsanglan's previous battles were all for personal gain. Otherwise, with his character and actions, how could he obtain the position of number 1 in Mo Yuntian's military? Yes, how could he rebel without building up his prestige? At the beginning of the rebellion, how could he gather so many people? Mu Tsanglan's intentions are extremely vicious. He has been plotting this for millions of years. His intentions are truly unforgivable. Heaven and earth will not tolerate it. Mu Tsanglan previously dismissed all the subordinates who were not loyal to him. He pretended to be benevolent and righteous, saying that everyone has their own ambitions. But after they left, he started to kill them. His atrocities are truly the rage of the heavens and the people. Mu Tsanglan, why aren't you dead yet? Hurry up and die. The entire world was cursing, and they were all cursing one person, Mu Tsanglan. But slowly, there were voices of opposition. This seems to be a bit too much. Mu Tsanglan is guilty of rebelling. This is undeniable. But you don't have to say that about him, right? It's fine if he likes women, but he can't go so far as to like men, right? Can he really like both men and women? Yes, why did all the crimes suddenly become Mu Tsanglan's fault? I don't have the right to comment on other things, but this one is definitely wrong. Mu Tsanglan's ancestral grave is in the imperial capital. How come it's not hundreds of thousands of mu? I went to measure it before. At most, it's only about 100 mu. The Mu family is a large family with a history of at least 1,000,000 years. Is this little bit of graveyard already considered quite small? How did it become hundreds of thousands of mu in your mouth? This is definitely wrong. Yes, this is too much. Yes, not only is Marshal Mu not interested in men, he has also never raped women. I believe everyone in the imperial capital can testify to this. We have nothing to say about you calling him a rebel. Even if you call him a hypocrite, there should be a limit. You can't just throw all the dirty water at Marshal Mu. Hundreds of thousands of women. Which man in this world can satisfy so many women? Even if he is a beast, he doesn't have that ability. His words are too unreliable. And this is even more ridiculous. A total of 1,000 crimes. Even if Mu Tsunglan hires a think tank to help him think of ways to commit crimes, there shouldn't be 1,000 crimes, right? What kind of mentality does the person who spread these rumors have? Isn't this too perverted? Chapter 23:14. That's right. Also, it's even more unnecessary to chase them down after they'd been dismissed. Wouldn't it save a lot of effort to deal with them in the barracks? At that time, they were surrounded by the Sky Emperor's army. It's impossible to chase after so many people without being noticed by the Sky Emperor's army. If those people were killed by the Sky Emperor's army, then it might be possible. Haha, I'm just saying it's possible, it's more likely. There are too many suspicious points. Too many of them are illogical, and inconsistent with the facts. Yes, then why smear Mu Tsunglan's name like this? He's already been condemned by everyone. Is there a need to step on him a few more times? I'm afraid there's something strange about this. Yes. Then, what's so strange about it? These soldiers are really dead. If that's the case, then if it wasn't Mu Tsunglan's doing, who is the most likely person to have killed them? You're spouting nonsense. Since it's not Mu Tsunglan's side, it must have been His Majesty who ordered the execution. Shh! Silence! I'm just talking about a possibility. I'm not saying that it was His Majesty who did it. It's just that the possibility is higher. The world is so chaotic. Who should we trust? This. In just 5 days, Mo Yuntian's public opinion had changed from everyone cursing Mu Tsunglan in unison to a cloud of fog. Many people began to feel lost, at a loss of what to do. There were also some who began to ponder and search for the so-called truth. What the hell is going on? If Mu Tianmon really wanted to rebel, he would have done it long ago after so many years. Why wait until now? He has always been at the pinnacle of power. Since the rebellion was not Mu Tsunglan's original intention, then why did he do it? What was the reason for him to do it without hesitation? If it's not greed, then what is it? Those who were killed were Mo Yuntian's soldiers. Since they had already left Mu Tsunglan, why were they still killed? His Majesty the Heavenly Emperor has promised to let bygones be bygones. Could it be that His Majesty the Celestial Emperor went back on his word? A monarch doesn't go so far as to joke, right? That's millions of people. What is this for? It's hard to understand. Also, the current situation of the battle is extremely strange. Sky Emperor clearly has an overwhelming advantage, but he is delaying the use of his superior forces to engage in a large-scale battle. Instead, he is letting his soldiers fight one battle after another. That is simply a strategy of suicide. I just heard, that when heavenly demons are injured, they need a large amount of soul power to recover quickly. What's the big deal about that? There have been similar rumors for a long time. I even heard that as long as one is a powerful martial artist, they would know about this ability of the heavenly demon. I was actually saying, didn't Mu Tsunglan say, didn't he say? You're saying that His Majesty the Heavenly Emperor needs a large amount of soul energy? That is to say, I'm just guessing. It's just a possibility. That's possible. I've also heard that the Heavenly Demon Clan does have such a strange ability. If that's the case, doesn't that mean that His Majesty the Heavenly Emperor is really Heavenly Demon? How can this be said so casually? But there are so many things, and all of them point to, it doesn't make any sense. As the saying goes, when things reach an extreme, they will move in the opposite direction. Mo Tianji's method was extremely pure. It began to affect public opinion from the opposite direction. Moreover, the two armies that were fighting also began to be suspicious. Each had their own misgivings, and each held back. The number of casualties on both sides sharply decreased. However, Yuan Tianjie couldn't make much of a response to this change in situation. Because, after Ermo Tianji's explosion, the little bit of energy that Yuan Tianjie had recovered with great difficulty was directly smashed to the freezing point. The damage to his soul was even more serious than that of the calligraphy and painting kings. Even if he ate a large amount of heavenly treasures, he could only recover his physical injuries and cultivation strength. He couldn't recover the damage to his soul. Therefore, Yuan Tianjie was also very helpless. If a large number of people didn't die, how could he quickly recover? Therefore, even though he knew that the direction of public opinion had changed, he could only brace himself and continue to walk down this path. He only hoped that more people would die. This way, his soul would have more energy, and he would be able to recover faster. Then, he would eliminate Mu Tsanglan in one fell swoop, and it would be much easier to deal with the situation on the continent. As the tide of public opinion rose again, it slowly began to give birth to other opinions. "Hey, do you know?" In a small voice. "What is it? Come closer, why are you so mysterious? What is it? I heard that in a battle over there was an unprecedentedly violent explosion. His Majesty the Heavenly Emperor flew out, and his entire body was filled with black energy. Filled with black energy? How could that be?" That's right, black energy. It is said that is the so-called black energy. Demonic chi. How is that possible? His Majesty the Heavenly Emperor. Quiet! Motherfucker, do you want to die? Even if you want to die, don't kill me. This is too unimaginable. It's really out of my expectations. That's right. Could it be that what Marshal Mu said is actually true? This I will not comment. If one person knew, then 2 people knew. If 2 or 3 people knew, then 200 people knew. Slowly, the entire street of ink cloud sky was whispering to each other mysteriously. As a result, such voices continued to be heard. Hiss, motherfucker! It can't be, motherfucker, motherfucker, motherfucker! At the same time, some of Mu Tsunglan's past achievements and attitudes were widely spread by people with intentions. Marshal Mu is actually a good person, that's right, I still remember that Marshal Mu once wrote a poem. It is called Thousands of Horses and Thousands of Soldiers Out of Ink Cloud Sky. The battlefield is filled with white bones guarding the loyal souls. I would rather die on the battlefield than let down the heavens in my heart. Sigh, Marshal Mu has protected Ink Cloud Sky for millions of years. He is really a good person who protects the country. Have you heard that Yuan Tianjie is a heavenly demon? This matter has already been confirmed. The evidence is conclusive. Ashamed. To think that we were a bunch of idiots before. We lived under the tyranny of the heavenly demon for so many years and still did not know the truth. If not for Marshal Mu, we would really be kept in the dark until we die. That would be a complete tragedy. Is this news reliable? Motherfucker, what do you know? Come. I will explain it to you in detail. Once I finish, you will understand. Woo. So the truth is like this. We have let Marshal Mu down, I deserve to die, I also scolded him the day before yesterday. I really feel bad, I also deserve to die, We need to clear Marshal Mu's name. Heavenly demon, scram out of Ink Cloud Sky. What you said is wrong. We should kill all of these demon bastards. Motherfucker, that disappointing son of mine is still serving in Yuan Tianji's army camp. This old man will immediately write a letter to scold that little bastard for associating with the heavenly demon. He is simply a traitor. The atmosphere on the battlefield slowly became a little strange. After 7 or 8 days, Yuchi suddenly discovered that when he gave orders, there were more and more doubtful gazes looking at him. Moreover, the soldiers also seemed to be somewhat listless. Their morale was unprecedentedly low. There were also some people who would run into a tent at the slightest provocation. Many people were whispering something inside. As soon as he went in, it would immediately become silent. When they fought, they were no longer shouting like before. Instead, they were listless. There were more and more chattering sounds. Although it was only around, Yuchi had already heard it more than once. Heavenly Demon, Your Majesty, I don't know. On the other hand, Mu Tsung Lan's side was somewhat idle. The daily battle between the two sides seemed to be dealing with official matters. Originally, in a day of battle, both sides would have at least hundreds of thousands of casualties. But in the past few days, especially in the last 1 or 2 days, there were almost no casualties. It was as if the two armies had discussed it. On the battlefield, you, I fight mine. Then, we will put on a show and deal with it. Swords came like the wind. Every move missed. Swords came like lightning. Swords cut through the wind. Fists came powerlessly. Palms came like cotton. Anyway, all the attacks did not have the most basic killing power. How could there be casualties? This is also called a fucking war. Yuchi hurriedly gathered all the generals and scolded. Is this how you fucking fight? Such dereliction of duty, such treason. And so? What welcomed him was the questioning and doubtful gazes of the generals. One of the rash generals finally could not hold it in and asked loudly. Marshal Yu, we want an explanation. Is His Majesty Sky Emperor a heavenly demon or not? You must know the truth. You are close to His Majesty Sky Emperor. Hearing this, Yuchi was so angry that his nose became crooked. What nonsense are you saying? You believe such a rebellious rumor? You even dare to ask? You are simply unreasonable. How is it nonsense? If it is not, why doesn't His Majesty Sky Emperor take out evidence to prove himself? So that we have no more doubts? That person was unconvinced and refuted loudly. Bastard! Do you want His Majesty Sky Emperor to strip naked for you to examine carefully? Yuchi was so angry that his face was flushed red. He did not choose his words carefully. That hothead was obviously still unwilling to give up. Yu Lai pinched his brows and ordered. Men, drag this bastard away and give him 200 beatings. In a silent place, the rash youth was dragged away. You're tuning into the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.